This week on the Markcast, big USFL news. We're breaking
the USFL news. We have feet on the street. We have the proposed kickoff date. We have proposed TV networks. What is a National Spring Football League? We are answering all of those questions today with friend of the show, Roy Johnson.
I see down for, and I'll just count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. I see 3, 4.
Also joining the show, talking with Reid, is Pat Steinberg.
Toronto beating Winnipeg and Ottawa winning a couple of times, and then Edmonton decided to not be a good team anymore. And it's been a weird year.
Robert McGregor, stadium announcer of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I don't know if I like you very much right now. I'm going to paint the picture. You're the stadium announcer, for the Blue Bombers. I just traveled to Vegas last week for the Kraken home opener, and the announcer the whole time, the Vegas Golden, just screaming, really made it hard on the guys. And now I feel like America's CFL team, the BC Lions are traveling to Winnipeg, and I think that you're going to give them a hard time as well. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
And Josh Burton from the Argos.
I think for any team, particularly in football, for teams who want to win a championship, they need to find out what their identity is late in the season and stick to that.
Big show, CFL Week 12 preview. We have an FCF rant in my heart. IRL NFTs aren't really a thing. A league that is not selling real things should not make fun of another league that is not real right now. There's a lot of... We're back to old form, I feel like, today. I do feel.
In real life, NFTs, it's an oxymoron. It's a contradiction. It doesn't make any flipping sense. We got pretty snarky. Reid had a bad trip to Canada. Daniel Austin complimented us, and this is the first time in a few weeks that Reid hasn't said anything about the BC Lions being America's CFL team, because they're not. So, with that being said, tune in this week to the Markcast. I gotta fade it down a little bit better. It gets really abrupt all of a sudden out of nowhere. It just goes.
It's good. As long as we're Paul, can I interest you in any IRL NFTs? I was thinking about turning this.
What the F is that?
We're going to get into I have a rant control. It has been a long time since I've had a fan controlled football rant in my heart, but I do have one today here later in the show. So long-time listeners, be excited for that. Long-time listeners also be excited. I have a book cameo request out for you for an upcoming birthday. So I don't know if we're going to get that, but long-time listeners will know our cameo escapades. So we have a long time. This would be an all-timer if this comes through.
That's cool to hear. The title of the show is Winnipeg Inevitable. I guess we're going to go to a Thanos graphic. Is that what we're doing? Like they're going to snap the other 8 teams away? Is that
makes sense?
Spoiling everything?
No, but we're going easy this week. We got big, huge USFL stuff later. We've teased it all day on the podcast. We're posting this early because, Paul's working stuff. I appreciate him coming on. We have a lot of news to post tomorrow, and everyone had the interview today. Everyone's very busy, and so we did all the interviews today. But yes, is Winnipeg inevitable? But stay tuned. We're going to time code all the USFL stuff, our big interview with Roy Johnson, and we will dissect that later in the show.
Very cool stuff. Pat Steinberg also joining the show. Robert McGregor, stadium announcer for Blue Bombers, joining the show, and Josh Burton. He's a video ops guy with the Argos. He's joining us as well. And then your USFL expose, so to speak. A lot of info coming down.
I feel like I did good journalism work today. So we have a proposed kickoff date in writing for the USFL for 2022. We have in writing proposed TV networks, schedules, things like that. Roy gets into all of that stuff. Roy, I like having boots on the ground in these places. Now we have Dylan from last week. We have Roy. We have people on the ground there to get this going. Do you want to go to Birmingham? I don't want to go to Birmingham. So
I don't really want to go to Birmingham. I have no business in Alabama, man.
Yeah. So anyway, huge show coming up. But yeah, stay tuned. We're going to get through all the CFL stuff. We got our interviews, and then I'll time code all of this if you want to jump around. But we'll do all the dissecting with the USFL stuff later in the show.
It would be remiss if we didn't start the show off on a kind of bad down note. Friend of the show, Josh Davis, of course, passed away last week. Very young, we don't know all the specifics behind what happened, but our thoughts are definitely going out to his friends, his family. And this came as a shock to all of us. It came to a shock for everybody in the entire niche football, alternative football, what do you want to call this, community, because he was well respected by a lot of different leagues. And I mean, the XFL broke their, the XFL isn't tweeting anything, and they came out and they said something about Josh as well. So we want to send our thoughts and prayers out to his family, his friends, his daughters, especially his daughters during this tough time. And it's rough. It's definitely rough. Yeah.
There's a GoFundMe up on Facebook. If you go to XFL News Hub, it's on all the social media stuff. I'll probably add it to the YouTube description. But they have a GoFundMe that covers some, his fiance, 3 kids, all that. Just terrible. And that's kind of the thing is, besides just what a wonderful person Josh was, all the work now that we've been doing this week with the USFL, I'm like, that's stuff that Josh would be doing, right? That Josh would be loving to do. And so trying to carry that on in his honor, figure out all this stuff. You can call this silly what all we're doing, but this means a lot to the people that are doing it. And rest, what do you say? Rest in power, right? Rest in power, Josh. And it was big. It was a big shock for everybody. XFL tweeted, Fan Control Football tweeted, XFL, even XFL Newsroom, we're competing. Everyone came together and was like, this is this goes beyond competing sites and stuff like that. This is just a situation that's just rather unfortunate. We'll leave it at that. And we'll just keep those people in our thoughts during this time. So, show must go on, and let's pick it up a little bit here. And I was shocked to see this, but Danny Austin complimented the Markcast. He was talking trash about us about 3 months ago. Said that we were begging him to be on the show. I don't know the communications Reid was having with him, but I guarantee he was exaggerating just a little bit here. Yeah, and I don't want to skip my Canada story either, so we'll get to that. But no, I would just the fun thing was how it just, because I don't follow Danny out of principle, and it just shows up suggested CFL. Oh, I was like, oh, what is this? And it was Daniel complaining about something, and so I was reading through it, and I was like, what am I going to make fun of him about? And then in the comment, he was conversing with someone, and he was like, yeah, that XFL news, that XFL podcast, those guys, I had it all wrong with them. They really know their stuff, and they're really a good, valuable thing. I'm like, well, here you go. I was assumed that I was going to make fun of Daniel Austin, and then I ended up getting a great compliment from him. So that's how easy it turns. AKA that's how easy everything can turn out for you, Cody Fajardo. That's how easy things can turn out for you, Cardell Jones. Just make nice. One feud down. I will tell you, the other feud we have will never die now. Everything has been blocked on every social media with the other feud that we have going on right now. But this feud is done. The other, just real quick. I think I have a feud. Who's your feud? I want to know why Arash is here in LA, hasn't called and wanted to grab drinks or anything. Whoa. Yeah. He's in LA? He's in LA. What's he doing in LA? He's watching a baseball game. I'm suspecting that we kind of work for the same company. Wow. Because he works for Sportsnet, right? Yeah. So do I. Well, I don't work for Sportsnet, but I work for the. Yeah. Wow. Now come on, dude. What if Arash moved here? That'd be fun. I still think I've offered Arash to come on. I should offer him again now that the Blue Jays aren't on. Now that we've buried our hatchet with Daniel Austin, maybe we can bury our hatchet with Arash. I don't have a feud with Arash at all. Kidding. Dude, I'm totally kidding. He doesn't have to call me, grab a bite to eat or anything. It would be cool. It'd be cool to, meet up in person, chat with him. But, I know he's probably irritated as spring football guys. Two things that don't go well together is Arash Madani and the word cool. So I'm just letting you know, I don't know about that. I have to share my Canada story really quick for people that don't follow me on Twitter. I posted a little bit on Instagram. Dorothy and I, thank God you weren't there. I would have gone nuclear, bro. I was already nuclear, so it would have been if Paul would have been there, obviously Paul was out of town on family tragedy. This would have been we might not have ever spoken again, after all of this. Dorothy and I, Friday afternoon, drive all the way up to the border. We have, Dorothy is so nice. We have all the drinks packed. We have snacks. We have food. We have we have everything we're going to be gone 2 nights. We have everything. we get up to the border and, pulling out my passports, all this stuff. Remember, we had to get Dorothy's passport. That was a big thing. We get up there and I'm pulling out my card. And he goes, well, you need that, but you also need a negative test. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because in the US, and most people I've talked to were all shocked. I mean, there was like 1 or 2 Canadians that were like, oh, you also need to have a test. Most everyone I talked to was like, wait, they all assumed I forgot my card. And when I told them, like, no, I have my card, they're like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
So we ran down to the Bellingham airport to get a rapid test. Long story short, it did not come in time. We spent a wonderful romantic night at the Hotel Bellwether in Bellingham, drove up to the border and waited until about an hour before game time to see if the test would come in, and it never did in time. So
I'm hanging out with Nydia like after I get back from Tucson that night, and we looked at the website. We're like, it just says vaccine record. On the website, it said vaccine record.
Yeah, it was even like filling out you had to download an app and like even filling that out and like which port we were traveling through in Canada. It was like this whole big thing. I had to Google like, what is the Pacific Highway border crossing? It's not Blaine. It's not like Interstate 5. It's like Pacific Highway. The whole thing's very weird. I mean, it's my fault. I mean, it's clearly my fault. The Lions lost 39-10. It was a horrendous game. I watched it from my mother's living room while we picked up Rosie, and I would have also been nuclear had I been at the game when that happened. So, like, it overall ended up being okay. But, Paul, if you had been there, because Dorothy and I, we got the last room at the Bellwether. There was a king bed. That was it.
Man, I couldn't imagine how nuclear you would have been if you didn't get a room that night.
Well, we could have stayed, like, somewhere. But, I mean, we wanted to make it nice to stay somewhere to, like, make good on it, like get good. I mean, we could have stayed at the side of the road somewhere, but it was,
Did you get any refund back on the Airbnb or anything?
I think they're waiving the cleaning fee. I mean, it's my fault. Like I don't, even the tickets, all that. But I had a wager with the Puck and Pig Skin podcast. He's like, so where's that Calgary logo? I'm like, flush $700 down the drain. Got detained at the border. Not changing the logo this week. Sorry. So he doesn't mean to welch on a bet, but honestly, like that. That's a pain in the ass there. Yeah. So anyways, so enough.
All right, moving on with the games. Like you just mentioned, Stamps beat the Lions 39-10. Blue Bombers beat the Elks, big surprise, 26-16. And the Alouettes beat the REDBLACKS 27-16. Of course, my Argos had the week off because they played twice in a week. So there's that.
Elks made Blue Bombers sweat. I mean, that's 26-16 is a lot closer than the 30-3 it was the week before. So
maybe the culture's changing. Week 12 coming up. The Argos taking on the Alouettes. The Lions visiting the Blue Bombers. Probably going to lose there. Sorry, Reid.
Yep.
The REDBLACKS visiting Hamilton, and the Roughriders visiting Calgary to take on the Stamps.
Yeah, big game. Calgary's back, Cody's back off his bye week. We'll see if he's got his, head back on, black hat, white hat. We preview all this stuff. Pat coming up. I talked with Bob McGregor. He's the BC stadium announcer, so we had funny stories about all that stuff. So tons of like all the game previews, all that stuff coming up. So I will do all the time codes.
Very cool. All right, moving on. News now. CFL Players Association lawyers examining the league's unilateral COVID-19 vaccine travel policy. The Players Association has distributed the following memo to its membership following a recent report regarding unvaccinated players being barred from the Grey Cup playoffs. Basically, their lawyers, their counsel are looking over the federal government's clarification on the travel restrictions, and they remain in talks with the CFL and the federal government to make sure people can travel.
Yeah, so Naylor came out like earlier yesterday, I believe, or it was either earlier today, yesterday, as we record, it's all screwed up. But they came out and they said the CFL decided that players who are not vaccinated cannot travel. We've talked about this in December to the East-West Finals or the Grey Cup because of the vaccine. They're going to be placed on the suspended list and not paid. None of this is a surprise. This was all announced. But now that it's actually a thing, they're trying to see if it's legal or not, which, would be wonderful to figure out before now. But they're trying to figure out like if they can bust them. But you know how large Canada is. Like, heaven forbid if the BC Lions make it to the finals, right, and they got to travel to Winnipeg, it's like a 10-hour bus ride or whatever. I mean, probably longer. I don't know that, but it's really far to get from place to place.
So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this. Of course, we previously said that they're not going to allow, unvaccinated players to play in the playoffs. And what was to say with Naylor here? I'm having a hard time squinting a little bit in my eyes.
It's 25 hours to drive from Winnipeg to BC. So there you go. I want to make sure from them out anyway. So, So Anyway, they're looking at it right now. It's one of those things. All this was announced previously. Like, we've talked about all this, but now it's, now the S is hitting the fan. They're trying to say the players can't get paid. We have some stories coming up with James Wilder, among others, proudly proclaiming he's not vaccinated. The long-running joke is that the Edmonton Elks do not need to worry about being in any of these games at all anyway, so that really doesn't affect anybody. I did think that was a good bit. Wilder tweeted, crazy how people reached out thanking me for speaking up. Sad we're in the league where most key players have to hide their beliefs and some are going against their beliefs to police owners with their body because we let politics into sports. I will never be that person. Obviously, a lot of negative feedback coming that way from Mr. Wilder.
This isn't politics. Yeah, this isn't politics, man. It's become political, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Rod had a very firm stance on his show today. You're an employee. That's kind of what it is. I know they have the Players Association agreements and all that they're working through, but you're an employee. Like we do weddings. We have to have cards and things. I don't want to say too many buzzwords for YouTube to ban us, but we have weddings now we film where it's required. Like, it's required in Seattle. It's required. We cannot go in there. And it's one of those things, if we want to be able to continue doing the work that we want to do, you just have to do it. So,
yeah. If you want to go to the Alamo Draft House here in LA, guess what? You're unvaccinated. You can't get in. Yeah. That's the way things are going. They're going to start rewarding the people that get to do the work. Yeah.
So this came out. So we remember we talked with Dave Campbell last week all about Trevor Harris getting benched. Now he's been traded to the Alouettes. Vernon Adams is on the 6-game IR. This is obviously big earth-shaking news. He's on a $1.1 million deal. He's kind of the big franchise guy of the Elks to be traded. We have a quote here. He's obviously disagrees with them, benching him and deciding not to play him. Do you see the quote there?
Yep. Each team has a certain direction they want to go. That's why you hire a head coach and general manager. They felt it was best to go the opposite route. I disagree with them not playing me, but that's because I'm confident in who I am and the skill set that I have to play this beautiful game in this country. It didn't end how I anticipated, but I have so much love for the guys in the locker room there and honesty with which Brock Sunderland dealt with me. Yep. Although we disagree on certain things and the decisions that were made, that's neither here nor there. You're always going to disagree. I know who I am and what I have to offer. So,
yeah, this is big. I talked with Pat about this. Edmonton's obviously kind of mortgaging their season, right? We're getting rid of him. We're bringing in Taylor Cornelius. Although former XFL hasn't necessarily lit the world on fire, it's just weird that, in such a quarterback dry league, where we're thriving, thirsting for these quarterbacks that you would, willingly trade away kind of your franchise. $1.1 million is a huge deal in the CFL to be trading away. The other issue with this, there had been questions if he had the card, if he had all that stuff, if he would be eligible to travel. And he says that during the bye weeks, he took care of all that. So Trevor Harris has come out and said that he is vaccinated and he is eligible to travel with all this stuff going on.
Apparently he had a medical exception that he applied for. He didn't hear back from it, so he just went ahead and got vaccinated. Good for him. Well, I don't know what the medical exemption of this vaccine is. Maybe an allergy to potentially what's in it. That's a thing that exists. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, and funny enough, you notice that Mr. Cameron Newton in the NFL got vaccinated, he claims, and now people are calling him about trade deals. Interesting how that works out. Ryan Rishog, he was on Dustin Nielsen's show. Dustin was on a couple weeks ago just talking about how they've lost faith in Trevor Harris. Something is clearly like nuclear. I don't know if you used that word a lot today, but in that locker room, this is like
toxic.
It's really crazy that one team is so much more off kilter than everybody else. I really can't wrap my mind around that. And neither could Dave Campbell. We've had people on that are close to this locker room. It's really crazy.
It's like every time that you have like a football team that's like got an issue, like the Raiders used to have an issue, and then we used to call the Portland Trailblazers the Portland Jailblazers when a lot of their players were going to jail, and that's kind of the same situation. It's like you're watching a train wreck happen in real time, and you can't take your eyes off it. And this culture thing that they were talking about, they want this culture. Like, what effing culture do you guys want? Like, this is a bad culture. This is a terrible culture.
I know. I thank God every day that here's the funny thing. People ask me all the time, they go, hey, where's that Edmonton flag? It's still here. It's been here the whole time. I've just never gotten rid of it yet. But I do think that we will burn that in a trash can by Lake Ontario during our Grey Cup live show. I think that will be the climax of our show, is burning the Edmonton Elks flag. So just to buzz through a couple signings here. Winston Rose got picked up, a DB with Winnipeg. Pat Steinberg has a lot more thoughts to say about that. The Blue Bombers also signed Shaq Cooper. He was let go from the Lions. So it's like kind of like the rich getting richer. Winnipeg's already killing it on defense. We signed an all-star DB. The other big thing, Sergio Castillo, he was traded from BC for a 4th-round pick. Sergio was I know he was with the CFL before, but then he was with the Roughnecks in the XFL. He was with the Jets. Remember, he won, then he got cut. So now he is back. So like Winnipeg, remember we talked, they didn't have a kicker last week. Now they have fixed all that. So
cool stuff. REDBLACKS, I should say, turning back to Evans after last week's mention. Paul LaPolice confirmed the team will go back to Caleb Evans under center spelled R-E at the end. Saturday against the Hamilton Ticats. LaPolice joined TSN 1200 on Monday, said Ottawa will give Evans another shot 1 week after he threw 3 interceptions against the Alouettes. Yeah,
Caleb came out hot. He was kind of the rookie with the golden hand, has really struggled the last couple weeks. The other big thing, REDBLACKS are playing against Ticats. Dane Evans is coming back off the 6-game injured reserve. Trying to figure out if there's enough time left in the season for Hamilton to make a run at it, because it's basically the Argos world in the East. Pat has a lot of thoughts to say about that as well. I would presume that Dane is starting this week. Otherwise, they'll go with Mazzoli again. Watford was the 3rd string, and they've never really gotten anything going with him. So
true. REDBLACKS signing quarterback Tom Flacco. Is that he's related to the other Flacco?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
The 6'1", 205-pound pivot.
That's copied. That's copied and pasted from CFL.com.
Where New Jersey, played his college ball at Townsend. The 26-year-old was signed by the Roughriders in January, and then he was one of the team's final cuts at the conclusion of training camp. And he'll join the team when he's cleared COVID protocols.
Hey, younger brother of Joe Flacco. He was I'm pulling up on the website now just to make sure. CFL said, what does that mean? 205-pound pivot.
I don't know. Every time I see the word pivot, just reminds me of friends.
Pivot. Anyway, Tom Flacco. Anyway, Andrew Harris, Winnipeg, your star rushing back. He hurt his knee last week. He was limping around. He did not practice on Tuesday this week. Obviously, I think it'll be kind of a game time decision for him. Brady Oliveira had to do a bunch of work earlier this season while Andrew Harris was out. He's really got kind of an injury thing, which is sad. You get these players. It's like Christian McCaffrey, right? He comes back for the Panthers, injured again. What can you do?
And some people took him number 1 in their drafts. Their fantasy
Christian
drafts.
McCaffrey, you're high if you took him number 1 in your draft.
Who's the guy? Like Derrick Henry? Is that the guy that people took? Like the
Derrick Henry's an all-star. You could have been better off with even like Nick Chubb or someone with the Browns, but I would say they're both injured now too. So
right, but like everybody's like, people that pick Derrick Henry number 1 in their leagues are clearly rolling right now.
Yeah,
there's no way. Matt Baker on the BC Lions lost to Roughriders. He says we're frustrated. I think we can play better. I've seen it in action. I think we can compete better. And I don't know. I think there was an energy missing.
I tweeted. I said we tried to get to the game, Matt. We were the energy that wasn't there.
A lot of cliches there. Let's just ring that cliche bell. There's all the cliches.
Right? We could have been there. I think we were the energy. So.
Speaking of bells, Bell Media, former TSN broadcaster Rod Black, a victim of the cutbacks there. Apparently, according to Black's agent, the veteran broadcaster's contract expired on August 31st, and he was not offered a new deal, even though he agreed to call a number of CFL games in early October, and performance was not a factor in his departure from the network. Yeah,
he said that he knew he was leaving for months and was surprised it didn't get out. And I'm like, well, it's because it's like CFL media broadcast deals. Like, I'm sure they weren't like,
yeah, and you guys like protect your own, you guys there's like a bubble, like you probably didn't spill much. So, with that being said, we're going to toss to break. We're going to come back and hear from all of our wonderful esteemed guests, all of our friends of the show. And then come back, talk more USFL news, talk to get Reid's little rant, and yeah.
Well, we have Pat Steinberg here with CFL.com. I have some words about the CFL Riders picks at some point during this interview, but thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
We're doing good. We were going to get you on earlier in the season, and then things have got busy. Now, we're week 12 now. What have you thought so far?
It's been a fun season, and it's been a hard year to pick. Like, it has been. I just got myself over 500 on my CFL.ca picks in week 10, and I was able to keep it there in week 11. But it's been tough to pick this year. Like, it's been so unpredictable, especially the first half of the season. I think we're starting to see it's starting to become a little bit easier to differentiate kind of the good teams from the middle of the pack to the not good teams. But yeah, it was tough early on. So there were a lot like that. Toronto beating Winnipeg, and you had Ottawa winning a couple of times, and then Edmonton decided to not be a good team anymore. And like, it's been a weird year, but the unpredictability in the first half was fun, and now starting to see some of these playoff races and the way things are going to shake down in the final third of the season, I think it's going to be a really good end of the year here.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, even just trying to do, not to mention like single game sports betting or anything, but just trying to do like fantasy picks on like, I go, okay, Vernon Adams, what was it like week 3? Like Alouettes won like 45 to whatever. I'm like, okay, now they decided to be a good team. I picked them. I mean, it's hard week to week to really know. I mean, I think now we're finally getting there, but it really did take a long time.
It did. And part of that was a few teams had to find their way. I think Calgary is one of the better examples of a team that's found their way, probably Toronto as well. There's still lots of things that need to figure itself out. Like Hamilton was single-handedly the cream of the crop in 2019. They made next to no changes on their roster, but they still need to figure themselves out. And Saskatchewan still has some things to figure out. There's some of the play calling questions that are there. So some of this stuff has figured itself out, but then you throw into the mix that we don't know who Hamilton's quarterback is going to be going forward. We don't know who Montreal's quarterback is going to be going forward. There's still lots more to figure itself out in this playoff mix. So it's going to be a fun final third of the year, but at the very least, we've had some teams turn it around, and obviously Winnipeg it's just a different world they're playing in right now. Like, nobody comes close to what they're able to do in all facets of the game.
No, the episode and thumbnail this week is Thanos, is Winnipeg. Like, I am inevitable. I mean, there's not even, it's almost like not even, I don't want to say that for, listenership and viewership. It's not even fun to watch sometimes just because, America's CFL team, the BC Lions are going into Winnipeg here. And I mean, I can't imagine they don't just get slaughtered, especially after how they played against Calgary last week.
Yeah, I feel bad for anybody playing Winnipeg right now. Like, how about Edmonton? They're trying to turn their season around. They had to go back to back with the Bombers. And I mean, the Bombers, here's the craziest thing about what Winnipeg's doing right now is that they just signed a kicker that I think that you can be confident in. But since Tyler Crapina went down, like that, nobody can hit a kick. Like, they're talking like, there are games when they're missing 3 and 4 field goals and an extra point, and they're still winning by 2 and 3 and 4 possessions. So they're stupid right now. Like, the way Caleros is playing, they've got Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat are on different levels right now. Adam Bighill is one of the best captains in defensive captains in the CFL. Their secondary is ridiculous. And here is the scariest part. They just brought back Winston Rose.
Yeah.
Winston Rose that guy, I named him. He only played a few seasons. I named that guy to the all-decade team, even though he only played like 3 seasons in the decade, because he's that good. Like, that, there might not be a better DB in Canadian football than Winston Rose, and the Bombers just brought him back. I don't know. Like, one game playoffs in football, anything can happen. But if the Bombers are on, I don't know who takes them down. I really don't.
Yeah, it is like the rich getting richer here. Where I mean, are they recruiting those players? I mean, is this everyone just wants to play in Winnipeg? I mean, I was surprised today because they signed, was it Shaq Evans off the BC Lions? Right? They signed
Shaq Cooper.
Cooper. Yeah, signed him as well. Where you're like, okay, we're still making moves here. Like, we're still building this roster out.
Well, there's a few things. I mean, I give that management group a ton of credit, and the way that they have built this team, like, It started in free agency, I want to say about 5 or 6 years ago. They signed Stanley Bryant from Calgary. Stanley Bryant is without question maybe the greatest left tackle in CFL history. And so they signed him. The next year, they brought back they brought home Andrew Harris, a Winnipeg guy, high school product from there. And so they brought back, the best or one of the best running backs in the CFL. And it kind of went from there. Justin Medlock they brought in. Medlock's not kicking this year, but that was a big part of it. And so they just have gradually started building up. Then they signed ahead of the 19 season. They stole Willie Jefferson from Saskatchewan, which was huge. And that was a massive swing for them. And then a pretty savvy move when they go out and they bring in Zach Collaros kind of out of nowhere. They trade for him, and Collaros returns to being the MOP candidate quality player he was in like 2014, 2015. So all those things. And now Winnipeg's the place to play. They've got one of the best stadiums in the CFL. They've got one of the best groups of fans in the CFL. In Canada, Winnipeg gets we kind of make fun of it and say, oh yeah, Winnipeg, it's a dump, that type of, but it's really like, it's a cool prairie city. It's like a Midwest US city. It's industrial, but the people are fiercely proud. They love their sports teams, and IG Field is one of the best. People always talk about Mosaic and Regina. IG Field is one of the best atmospheres that you're going to find in football. So people want to play in Winnipeg right now. And so if you're Winston Rose, you come back, that's where you played before. You're like, well, yeah, of course I'll come back to Winnipeg. Got a chance to win another Grey Cup. And Mike O'Shea's got this team clicking, and Richie Hall is one of the greatest defensive minds the CFL's ever seen. Like, it really is. You said it. Rich get richer. That's what this Bombers team's all about right now.
Yeah, teasing later in the episode, we have Bob McGregor coming on, right? Talking, and we talk about, how he just the excitement in Winnipeg and in the stadium there, and him calling the games and stuff. I mean, it really does seem like the coolest party in the world. That no one else. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, it really is like one tier, and then everyone else is multiple steps down.
Well, and apparently they have this thing. I've never been to IG Field. I've been to the old stadium, which it was time for an upgrade. But they have this area, and sometimes on TV it looks like it's not full, but that's because all the like 20 somethings go to this one area at the one end zone, and they're just partying down there. So they're always sold out or close to sold out. And when you don't see people in the stands, it's because they're all in that one area, just ripping drinks and having fun.
I want to talk about the Trevor Harris trade, and what was that as groundbreaking to you as it seemed like to, we had Dave Campbell on last week trying to make sense of the Trevor, with all that. And now, see him traded, big monumental trade, right? What did you make of that? Well,
I was stunned by it. Like at CFL.ca, I did my preseason predictions, and he was my most outstanding player. I was like, Trevor Harris, MOP. I kind of missed on that one. And so I was, even though it's been a nightmare year for the Elks, and even though they healthy scratched their guy, I was still stunned to see the deal get made, because that's a big time quarterback. And I guess I look at it as a tenure that never quite hit the mark in Edmonton. Like, there were so many times when it was that close to kind of fully meeting its potential or realizing its potential. Like, before he got hurt in 2019, he was in the MOP, maybe leading the MOP conversation. Then he got hurt, missed 4 games, took him out of the MOP conversation. Cody Fajardo was the West nominee, deservedly so. Brandon Banks and Hamilton ended up winning it, deservedly so. And then he comes back. He has this one dynamite, near flawless playoff game in Montreal. And then again, not great against Hamilton, but you went into the offseason thinking, okay, well, Edmonton's a team to watch out for. Look at how good Harris was in his first year there. Season gets canceled. 2021 comes around. They go out, they bring in Darrell Walker, they bring in James Wilder, and you're like, oh man, and Greg Ellingson, his favorite target's still there. You're like, okay, I don't know who's stopping this Elks offense. And again, it just hasn't quite hit the mark. They have that one game. Harris, I think, threw 3 incomplete passes on Labor Day against Calgary. He looked like he hadn't missed a beat from 2019, and he was back to elite form. And you're like, that was that teaser of what it could be. But again, it's just like, if here's the top, it just kept on getting there and falling back, and it never quite got there. And then, there's been a lot of stuff. There's been a lot of innuendo about what's happening behind closed doors in Edmonton, and some strife in the locker room, and maybe Harris being a part of it. I don't know. I'm not in that locker room. We just heard the innuendo. And so it's a big move for Montreal. It certainly gives you an idea what they feel about Vernon Adams and his chances to return. So I was a little stunned by it. I'm interested to see how long it takes for Harris to get into his first game with the Alouettes. And if you're Edmonton, you're ridding yourself of a big contract. You're bringing in a pretty promising defensive end that's 25 years old. And you're clearly looking to 2022 now in Edmonton. Their season's clearly done. So you've got an opportunity to move on from Harris, go in a different direction. And Montreal feels like they could be playing in the Grey Cup game, and rightfully so in that East Division. So they go out and get a guy who has played in the Grey Cup before. I can understand why they thought about making that move.
Yeah, I get that. I just don't get from Edmonton where quarterbacks are such like low commodity, hot commodity, right? We got to get them. We got, we need, generally need two, right? We got to have whatever. And then, it was weird enough to sit him, now to just totally get rid of him for, Taro Cornelius, which, XFL, okay, let's go here. But it hasn't really lit the world on fire, right? It's not like he came in and even had like a Caleb Evans first game where it's like looking unstoppable. It just seems weird that they would just feel like they're forfeiting the house here and just moving on, like you said, to next year.
It definitely raises some question marks as to what the direction is going to be for 2022. There's been some talk. Is Brock Sunderland going to be the guy that is at the helm as general manager there? Is Jamie Elizondo going to be the head coach once again? These questions are out there after a nightmare year, and it's not like right now there is a plethora of quarterbacks knocking on the door to be starters. I'm curious as to what Toronto does in the offseason. They've got McLeod Bethel-Thompson and Nick Arbuckle. So if Edmonton really wanted to look, they could try going there. There's the Matt Nichols. He started in Edmonton. Maybe they think about going back down that road. Has not been good for Nichols in Ottawa this year. So I don't know how really viable an option that is, but there's not a ton of options out there. Jake Mayer's had a good year in Calgary. Maybe they try to pounce on their provincial rival in that respect, but it's not like there's anybody knocking on the door. Like Trevor Harris, for instance, when he got his shot in Ottawa, he was knocking on the door. He was behind Ricky Ray in Toronto. So, okay, Harris is this next guy. And Arbuckle was knocking on the door in Calgary behind Bo Levi Mitchell. And I know that it hasn't worked all that well for Arbuckle in Ottawa, but you're like, okay, he's that guy. He can be that next starter. I don't know if there's that next guy. If I'm them, I might try and take advantage of Toronto's situation. I'm a big McLeod Bethel-Thompson believer. And if somehow they could pry him away from Toronto, that'd be interesting to see, and like truly give him a shot and say, MBT, you're our guy. That might be an interesting way for them to go. But, Toronto's not thinking about that right now. They're thinking about playing for the Grey Cup.
I love McLeod Bethel-Thompson. Right? It seems like a lot of people, big fan favorite. Do you think Toronto is sold on him long term, or is it just like, Arbuckle's not working out right now? Right? Wasn't her, we need somebody to play. Is that a long-term viable solution for them after this year?
I think they should give it more thought of being a long-term viable conversation or option, but I don't get the feeling they will just because they haven't, right? MBT didn't even come back until, late in the conversation this year. They went out, McLeod Bethel-Thompson had himself, he was one of the bright spots for Toronto in 2019 and what was a generally miserable year. And they still went out and first went after Matt Nichols and then did the swap of Nichols for Arbuckle. So they clearly weren't looking at him as the guy coming into this year. So I don't know. I don't know if I see them thinking that way going into next year. And, if you're MBT, it's kind of just like, yeah, okay, well, I'll go somewhere else and I'll prove that I can play because it's all he's ever done. Like one of the coolest stories and one of the really cool examples of a journeyman that just all along the way, like where have we seen him play? We've seen him play arena. We've seen him play spring league. We've seen him play CFL, and I'm probably missing 2 or 3 stops for him. So I think there's a real chance. Like give him an opportunity to actually be the guy and empower the guy. That's why I wonder if Edmonton doesn't think about doing that. Say, okay, and maybe it's not him. Maybe they covet somebody else. But I want McLeod to get a shot somewhere where he's not always looking over his shoulder. That would be kind of cool for him to get.
Well, absolutely, because we did I'm trying to remember what you said. That we had our big McLeod. I think it was like week 2. We did our big episode on him, and like he was signed to like 5 or 6 NFL teams. Like was signed to the 49ers twice. I mean, it really has been like this dog's just journey to get wherever. And then now, like you said, to always feel like you have someone over your shoulder and not just saying like, "This is my ship. I'm going with it." It has to be very hard to play with that.
Well, and I think part of it, like I really think that he enjoys playing with a chip on his shoulder. And why wouldn't he? Because he hasn't really been believed in the entire way. But, even in 2019, I mean, it was James Franklin who was right there in the conversation, and he kept on getting chances. And it was always like, okay, well, who's really the guy that they believe in? And in 2 years, Franklin was the guy that, I think Toronto was hoping would take the ball and run with it. And McLeod Bethel-Thompson was just plan B. And I think the exact same this year. I think you don't go out and acquire and sign Nick Arbuckle unless you think he's plan A. And I think for Toronto, it's like, McLeod's probably plan B. And once again, McLeod Bethel-Thompson has been like, okay, well, screw it. I'm going to show you that I'm not a plan B. So I'd just be really interested to see how that guy would react and how he would play if he was plan A. And if somebody empowered him and said, you're on top of our depth chart, you're going to be our guy, let's go. I mean, his numbers this year are outstanding. He deserves all of the accolades he's getting this year. I mean, I think that he's thrown 2 interceptions all year. His efficiency rating is near the top of the league. Like, Toronto is 6-3 and on top of the East Division, and a big reason why is because of that guy.
Yeah, 100%. I want to talk about Hamilton. Dane Evans, right, coming back. Is there enough time for them to figure out this season, or because it's weird because it's short, right? I mean, is there enough time for them to kind of get this ship righted?
Yes, there is, and 100% there is, and I think there's a good chance that happens because right now it's pretty clear that Dane is the best option for them. They look like a very different team when Dane Evans was quarterback before he went down. And obviously Watford and Mazzoli haven't been able to pick up the same level of play. And it's too bad for Mazzoli because the last time we saw him, he was a most outstanding quality player, and he hasn't been able to find that again. But Dane Evans, I think, is the best option for them. So if he comes back and looks like the guy he was before he went down, then I think Hamilton absolutely can, because they still have a significant amount of high-end weapons offensively. And that defense, like when you're talking about that defensive backfield and that defensive line and Simone Lawrence at linebacker, like they have the capability of being an elite CFL defense. And I know it hasn't totally come to fruition this year, and they definitely have underachieved at 4-5. But all you got to do, East Division's wide open. If you're Hamilton, all you got to do is start to find your game, avoid being crossed over by a West Division team. And the good news for them is that there's no ties. If you are crossing over from the West, you have to have a better record. So if the same team is 4-5, if say it's BC right now, BC is sitting there as a 4-5 team tied with Hamilton, there's no tiebreaker. Hamilton gets the 3rd spot in the East. BC doesn't cross over. So Hamilton's in the driver's seat for a playoff spot. And if this league, 14 games, 18 games, doesn't matter. This league, it is proven. It is all about peaking and finding your game kind of in that final 2 weeks of the regular season. Winnipeg proved it last year. We've seen below 500 or 500 teams win the Grey Cup before. And it's all about when you hit your stride and when you find it. So there's plenty of time left for Hamilton. They've got 5 regular season games to go. There's too much talent on that team. That head coach is too good. That offensive coordinator is too good. So I think they'll figure it out. And I think there's plenty of time for them to figure it
out. One team I wish would do better, I'm not too sure about, BC Lions, right? They seem to be on this downward spiral, right? Really can't get anything going right now. Got walloped by Stampeders, horrendous game to watch. I tried to go to the game. We got detained from the border, watched it at home. It was horrendous. Do they have enough time left, especially with Winnipeg and everything going on there?
They didn't let you cross the border. Hey, what was the issue?
We didn't have the card and the test.
Okay, so you needed both.
I didn't know. Now, not very many people I've talked to have knew that you needed both.
Hey, next time you'll know. And one day it'll be normal again. Crossing.
Well, it's better to know now than because we have our Hamilton flights booked. So far better to know on the drive to BC than it is the flight to Hamilton.
Yes,
so.
It is easier to fly right now. It is way easier to fly. There's apps. It's really simple to fly over the border. So I think you'll be good there. Anyway, I digress. I don't know. BC is a team that showed some really good promise early on. Michael Riley looks like himself. Now, Calgary did some really good work on Riley in this last weekend. Like, they frustrated him all night long. They were getting after him. They were mixing up coverages. 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, and under 200 yards for Riley. Like, we haven't seen that from him this year. Most of the year, he's looked like the old Mike Riley. He looked like the guy that when Edmonton was leading the passing chart every single year. That's what Riley's looked like for most of the year. And I'm not really worried about him. I'm not really worried about that passing game. Like, when, losing Lucky Whitehead, that was a big blow because he was a breakout superstar. But having Brian Burnham, and I still like that receiving group. What was kind of the false flag or the red herring was this defense. Their points against numbers were really good, but it was very clearly a bend but don't break type situation. And sometimes when you see a team give up a lot of yards, but not give up a lot of points, you're wondering, okay, is that kind of a dam that's about to burst? And I feel like that's happened in 2 of their last 3 games. That they got absolutely pounded by Winnipeg. They got pounded by Calgary, although Calgary didn't score a lot offensively. There were some special teams in there, and Rene Paredes scored 18 of those 39 points. So it wasn't as if that was all on the defense, but I think there's a lot of potential with the Lions. I think they're significantly better than they were last year. I trust Rick Campbell as a head coach implicitly. That's a really high-end head coach, and I think that he'll be able to keep them competitive here. But, it's going to be tough for a West Division team, a 4th West Division team, to make the playoffs this year. It feels like for the first time in a while, a crossover is less likely than likely. So BC is going to have to catch Saskatchewan or Calgary, I think.
Yeah, I don't feel good. I was feeling really high on this about a month ago, and then it was BC lost, a couple of very winnable games. I don't think we had much hope against Winnipeg, but I think the previous 2, especially against the Roughriders, no real excuse there. Game of the weekend, what are we looking at? What are you excited for?
For this coming weekend, to me, there's no doubt it's Sask and Calgary, and that is one of the best rivalries in the CFL. Like, it's funny. I'll give you a little Canadian geography lesson. Like, that sounds condescending. I don't mean it like that. No, but I'll just give you so nobody travels like Sask fans, first of all, but nobody travels like Sask fans to games in 2 markets, Calgary and Winnipeg. So they play Winnipeg back to back every year. That's always an awesome, the Labor Day rematch and the Labor Day game, amazing atmosphere. But when Sask plays Calgary, two times a year, 1 time a year, whatever it is, like, we're talking about half green at McMahon Stadium. Like, there are so many transplanted people from Saskatchewan that live in Calgary. Calgary's a really transient city. A lot of people came here for oil work and that type of stuff. So a lot of born and raised Saskatchewanites or Saskatchewaners. And I don't know, one of those is Saskatchewan, correct, in Alberta, in Calgary specifically. So you've got all the born and raised people from Saskatoon or Regina or Prince Albert or North Battleford or wherever they're from. So they're Riders fans. They grew up as Riders fans. They live in Calgary now. And it's only like a 7-hour drive from Regina to Calgary. So then you've got, these absolutely rabid fans are like, well, huge game in Calgary. Get in our car. Let's go. There's a Motel Village is right by the stadium. So there's like a travel lodge and a couple of other hotels that they just make a killing every time the Riders come to town. The Denny's on 16th Avenue and Crowchild Trail makes a killing every time. So it's going to be an awesome atmosphere in Calgary. This is a massive swing game. Like, the Riders need this game if they want to host a playoff game. If Calgary beats them again, that's 3 straight wins for Calgary over Saskatchewan. That's hard to do. And now the Stamps are in the driver's seat to maybe be hosting a West semifinal against Saskatchewan. And I'll tell you, yes, Riders fans travel well, but there's not a home field advantage better in the CFL than playing at Mosaic. And I like Sask's chances of winning over Calgary playing at home much better than I do on the road. So huge game for the Riders. I think this offense needs to get some of their confidence back. Cody Fajardo's getting, it looks like Cody's getting not just one, but two like ridiculous elite receivers. Shaq Evans and Duke Williams look like they're going to play this week. So that is a really big element thrown into the mix. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Trey Roberson, who Calgary just signed, isn't going to play this week, but Calgary's beat him 2 in a row. And has really done a good job against them and been definitively the better team, I think, in those 2 games. So I think Sask's got something to prove. I think Cody Fajardo's got something to prove. And this is a massive swing game in the West Division. So that's the one for me without question.
Last question for you tonight. We could go on forever. I got to be courteous. Paul will kill me if this. We go like 45 minutes like we did the last time we went. Is the bye week, the time off? We hypothesized last week, is Cody Fajardo the man in black from Westworld, right? Is he, are we going to be white hat Cody, black hat Cody coming back? Did the bye week get him right?
I think there's a chance of it. And I think that he went into the bye week kind of looking at things and saying, I need to get right. I think that this week of preparation and this week of practice, his favorite target is back. I think that the fact that Shaq Evans is back, like Cody and Shaq are like 2 peas in a pod. And like, I remember I did this column, the Monday Morning Quarterback at CFL.ca, and I was naming the best quarterback receiver duos in the league. And, I went with Harris and Ellingson, and I think I went Eric Rogers and Bo Levi Mitchell and Michael Riley and Brian Burnham. I left out Fajardo and Evans. I went with my 5 and they were my 6, but I only went 5. So I think it was Fajardo who read the article, said, responded to CFL.ca, said, hey, Shaq Evans, where are we? And I laughed at it. I was like, good on you. So they're a pretty good duo too. So I think Cody's going to be fired up to have Shaq Evans back if Shaq plays. And then you get Duke Williams in there too. And I know it's been a while since Duke's played and he's learning a new scheme, but if that guy catches fire, if that guy looks like the guy that completely dominated the league for a couple seasons with Edmonton, like watch out for this offense. And they still have William Powell is one of the more underrated players and consistently what he's been able to do this year. So I think that there's a really good chance that Sask gets themselves right, and I think there's going to be a really competitive game at McMahon Stadium.
That's good. Yeah, Cody is a little precarious when it comes to the online. I tweeted about him in an article and we got blocked. So I mean, Cody is very precarious. You definitely don't want to write anything besmirching about the one Cody Fajardo online. Pat, this has been great. I mean, it was well worth the wait. I'm glad that we could do a mid-season check-in here, and I really appreciate it. It's like rapid fire. We went through all this. It's been good.
Awesome. Good to we'll do it again soon. Good to be on.
Thanks, man. We have Robert McGregor here with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I was thinking about this. I don't know if I like you very much right now. I'm going to paint the picture. You're the stadium announcer, for the Blue Bombers. I just traveled to Vegas last week for the Kraken home opener. We lost terribly. And the announcer the whole time, the Vegas Golden, just screaming, really made it hard on the guys. And now I feel like America's CFL team, the BC Lions are traveling to Winnipeg, and I think that you're going to give them a hard time as well. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Going into any stadium is like going into a lion's den because the crowd is, for the most part, all with the hometown team. The stadium announcers are supposed to be neutral, but they're not necessarily neutral. Of course, they're going to scream louder when there's a home team touchdown. But all in all, I think that every stadium and every arena is kind of the same. You're much more jacked for the crowd because you're playing to the crowd, right?
Yeah, I just, we're home, Seahawks, Mariners. I mean, very rarely am I traveling to a really hot bed. I was like, this is like palpable, the frenzy. I mean, it was really cool. And I imagine that the Winnipeg games have to be, with such a successful team right now, I mean, they have to be just off the charts, right?
They are. We actually had a competition a couple of years ago where they brought in meters and were checking the sound at different points across the league. And it came down to sort of who's the loudest fans. Is it the Rider fans in Saskatchewan, or is it the Bomber fans in Winnipeg? And we actually were up like around, I think it was 1.08 or something, or 108 decibels, I think, at one point, which is it's about like sitting next to a jet airplane. Yeah.
I heard wasn't there some floozy math with that? I mean, I've heard both sides because I've heard the Roughriders too. I mean, is that a scientific fact that Winnipeg is the loudest fan base?
So both meters were taken right at midfield, just outside of the announce booth for TSN. So it's as close to apples comparison as you could possibly get. But no, it's not scientific. You'd really have to have mics all the way around, and you'd have to be, sensing sort of a cumulative amount. I don't even know if that's even possible, right? But the Bomber fans are the best.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, but that's the thing is, we've been tracking for a couple weeks now, frustrations in Saskatchewan, right? And, Cody Fajardo and all that stuff, and him yelling, we called him the man in the black hat last week on the podcast. And it does really seem like Winnipeg is taking that mantle as the most diehard, the team you want to be with. What is it like just being a part of that organization right now?
So I got to say this. I'm the old guy here, so I go back. I can remember games with Tom Wilkinson and Warren Moon and Ron Lancaster. And I haven't seen a team that is as well-rounded as this Winnipeg Blue Bomber team in 2021. I really have not seen anything like it. It's great to watch, but it's almost superhero status. Like these guys are doing stuff that you've just not seen before in pro sports. I mean, they're outscoring all of their opponents by 2-1. And so, fourth quarters, they've given up 6 points all year in 10 games.
Yeah, it's almost at the point where it's not fun to watch.
What do you even say to that, right? It's like, whoa.
Yeah, when we had the Lions, was it week, 2 weeks ago, whatever, when they played the Lions, it's almost not even fun to watch because, and then, obviously this week again, I'm like, well, this is going to be a disaster, going in, if we can't.
It could be, but keep in mind, and it's like the any given Sunday type of thing. The BC Lions are not a poor team. The Lions are as good as I think, at least 4 or 5 other teams in this league. And all it takes is for the Bombers to come out and just be a little bit off and the Lions to come on really strong. And this game could go the other way. There's no, you can never just have a guarantee, even with a team as strong as the Bombers. They got to come out, they got to play hard every down, every quarter, every game. And so far they've done that, but that's not to say that they can't lose. They've already lost once this year to Toronto, so they can lose. The Lions are really good on defense when they put their minds to it. So if they can put that kind of effort in for 4 quarters, this could be an interesting game for sure.
Yeah, so the plan had been we were going to the game last week in BC. I got detained at the border because we didn't know you needed both your card and the negative test. And so, I ended up watching the game from my mom's living room. And I will say, thank goodness I was not at that stadium because it would have been a spat of depression. You said, the Lions have to want to win. I couldn't imagine coming off of 15 days off and looking worse than they did last Saturday.
No, absolutely. And part of that is, that is something that almost every team worries about coming out of a bye week. Are the guys going to be sharp or are they going to be kind of flat? And I think for the Lions, they came out flat. But they're a team that, can bounce back. And, Riley's got his struggles. But the Lions, I wouldn't count them out. They still have that ability to bounce back, and they have at other points during the season and in previous seasons as well. So I can recall more than a couple of seasons where the BC Lions had a weak first half of the season and then started coming on strong and got into the playoffs and made some moves. So we'll still have to see, right?
Talk about, game day experience, right? I mean, it's been different this year. Obviously, all the restrictions and everything. Winnipeg came out really strong, right? Wanted to keep everyone safe right away. Have we gotten back to just the energy levels and the excitement and stuff in the stadiums with everything going on? I mean, what's the season been like that way?
So 2019 ended. At that point, we had no idea what was ahead, right, in 2020. We had our Grey Cup celebrations here down through the main part of downtown and out to the Forks. And everyone went away celebrating. It was a great season, right? 2020 hits, the season's canceled. There were a lot of Bomber fans that, were really missing football by the time it came back, and it came back a little late this year. But once we get the green light to go ahead, they had to scramble to get together a schedule that would hold 14 teams or 14 games for all the teams, all 9 teams. And that first game back was electrifying. We had a full house at IG Field. And you could feel it. And I'm kind of disconnected a little bit from the fans because I'm up in the press box area and I got a big wide open window, but I don't get that same connection that I felt as a fan sitting in the stands next to all these electrified people, right? But it felt like a playoff game. And it was loud. It was crazy. Everyone was celebrating. And when the Grey Cup banner was unveiled, I would guesstimate that there probably wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was just that emotional. It was amazing. Yeah.
It's just interesting to me, as someone covering these leagues and watching NFL games and watching CFL games, and just how the best parts of the CFL, right, are how connected the fan base really is, right, and feeling like we're a part of that journey, right. I mean, I've only been covering this thing for drop in the bucket, right, for the lifetime of the CFL, but if the BC Lions ever went to the Grey Cup, you get emotionally invested in this. I mean, it's the best part of the league. What is it about that draws that from these fans?
Wow. That's a great question. I'm just not sure that I can put that into 10, 15 words and try to describe it. The problem with the CFL is that they don't get the same kind of attention that you see south of the border with the NFL. It's a totally different game. It looks the same, but it's totally different, right? And the fans, I think, they're more attached to the game as a group. So, sure, you're going to cheer for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, you're going to cheer for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers or the BC Lions, but you still care about the rest of the league, right? And that's, I think, what separates us from most of the other sports. Here in Winnipeg, we get the Winnipeg Jets. You're a Jets fan. You don't really care about anything going on south of the border, right? Like Tampa Bay is Tampa Bay. The only time I worry about Tampa Bay is when Winnipeg's playing Tampa Bay, right? So it's a different feel. It's a different kind of fan experience for sure.
I'm trying to figure out what's next for Winnipeg. Here, okay, Hamilton's the big, whatever, they knock them down, right? Roughriders, the big, they've beat them now. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what is next for a challenge for them. I mean, they just signed, right, Sergio Castillo, right? That was the big, I guess we can talk about that too, but it just seems like they're putting all the pieces together. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say it's boring, right? Because we want the viewership and we want the listenership, but I mean, what is next? What's on the docket here?
So, I will say, at the end of 2019, they were referring to the top 3 guys at the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as the Canadian Mafia, right? So you had Mike O'Shea and Kyle Walters and Wade Miller, and yeah, they were putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, and it paid off, right? They got the Grey Cup. But this year, there was a 1-year lull where nothing was happening. And there were a lot of key pieces to our team that went away. And, either they retired or they moved on. One of the biggest pieces I think you started to refer to is Justin Medlock. So when you lose a kicker of that magnitude, it really changes the dynamics of the team. And we had a few holes to fill also with the DBs, but they managed to fill all those holes, right? The only hole left, I think, was the place kicking. And that's nothing to say that Leggio or Murtado wasn't pulling their weight. They were, but they're not there, right? They're not at the Justin Medlock level just yet. And that might take another year or two for them to get there. But in the meantime, we need a kicker, and we need somebody that finishes off everything that we got: offense, defense, special teams. And Sergio played for the Bombers back in 2015, and he did well. I mean, he came in late in the season, but he did well for a kicker who was still pretty new, right? I think he got signed in the NFL, but he never actually played it down. And then he came up here and he was able to do some kicking. Probably would have been our kicker going forward if it weren't for the fact that Medlock became available in 2016. So, that's what it is. I think Sergio's shown that he can do what he does. And so now he's back with the Bombers and he's excited about it. And the team is. Probably won't see him play until sometime in November. Won't be playing for this game coming up with BC. But by the same token, Murtado has not been that bad. I mean, he missed one field goal, right? He was 4 of 5 in the last game. So he's figured out what was going wrong with his technique. But yeah, it pays to have a solid kicker if you're gonna go all the way, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean that heaven forbid we get down to the last second, whatever. I mean, how many games are won and lost? Like we cover fan control football, and they have no place kicking at all, right? They go, well, kicking's boring. I'm like, how can you say that when we have the Jaguars, right? Break a 20-week losing streak, with two back-to-back 50+ yard field goals by this kid that just got signed, the week of. I'm like, I just can't imagine you not. So yeah, it's like that one chink in the armor that you don't want to have for Winnipeg going in. And it's cool too, because, Sergio spent time in the XFL. I mean, our listenership is excited for that as well, right? I think it's cool when the leagues and players can go between, and it just adds to people that really are invested and care about their story, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. And I will say this, you get down to the playoffs, you've had a 14-game season. That means that whoever you face in the playoffs has 14 games worth of tape on you. So you may have beaten them well during the season, but come playoff time, they've had an opportunity to really prepare for that playoff game. And it's do or die, right? Like you either win that game or you don't. And many, many times the top-tiered team has been knocked off by a second or third place team simply because they were better prepared than the guys who should have won. So playoff time is a completely different game. And at this point in time, I think there's at least 5 teams out there that are capable of going all the way to the Grey Cup and winning.
Assuming, I kind of assume, Winnipeg, right, takes the West. Who do you see, the Argos are coming on strong right now, right? I mean, I'm glad that McLeod got his, second, third shot, now he's kind of leading the helm. Is it Toronto's race in the East? Who do we see on the other side?
I don't count out Hamilton at this point. I mean, those two teams together are pretty neck and neck. If you look at the points for and against, Toronto's actually let more points against than they have for. So, I'm not a huge stats guy, but I just know from watching those two teams, they're so close. This could really be a matter of who comes out of the East. It's either Toronto or Hamilton, for sure.
Are you when it comes to the Grey Cup, right? Hamilton hosting. How does that work in terms of day of stuff there, right? Like, if Winnipeg's in it, do we get to go? Do you get to do some work there? How does that work?
I'd love to do that. No, the way it works is if you're the stadium announcer for that venue, then you're at that venue. So I've called a couple of great Cup games in Winnipeg, but Winnipeg wasn't playing. So it was, then you really have to be neutral.
Because it's exciting. I mean, you have to feel, well, yeah, it's like your home, right? It's like I own this building, and then you're coming in here.
It's a totally. I can't even really. I mean, I've tried to explain it many times, and it's. I guess this is the best way I can do it. So this is my 25th year. We started in '97 with the Bombers. In the beginning, it was really just kind of announcing, and that's really all I was doing, right? Like, okay, it was, whoever ran the ball 6 yards at 2nd and 7, or whatever it was. But what came to happen is that you almost become almost a maestro, like a conductor, and you can get the crowd into it. But if you're always up here, you're always up at the high point, you're going to lose everybody because it's like, why is he so excited? It was only a 1 yard run, right? So you have to find a way to work the crowd and kind of build to a crescendo and then let it come back down a little bit and then go again and then come. If you don't do that, the crowd's not really in sync with what the rest of them are around the stadium. I mean, and that's why it's hard to explain, but it's when all those things are going at the same time, the crowd is all into it. I'm into it. The music guy's into it. The audio guy's into it. Our producer is into it. And then I also have an announcer who is, reading all the spots, and she gets as excited as everybody else too, right? So it's a real team effort that's happening up in the production booth that coincides with what's happening with the audience, and it's a really symbiotic relationship, it's really cool. I've never experienced it. I've done stand-up comedy. I've done. I was a news anchor and a sports anchor. I've done reporting. I've done emceeing work. But I've never felt this. This is just something really unique. Yeah.
Well, and especially where, we talk, the CFL, trying to draw the gates, trying to draw the crowds. And maybe it's just part of, have been off, not attending these things for the last couple of years. But like I said, going to that hockey game, you feel like you're part of this show, right? And I think that's a good thing, Vegas does in general. And obviously, you're part of that. Like you said, it's a maestro. You're playing the crowd, getting them into it, building that. It's why you don't watch it on TV, right? I mean, you go to the game to be a part of the game.
No, absolutely. And I got to say that in '97, when I started, this would have been at the old stadium at Canada Inns. That field was pretty much just 110 yards, the end zones. We had a little bit of north end seating, but it was primarily east and west side. It wasn't a bowl like it is now. We didn't even have ribbon tape around, so there was no real graphic anything happening back in 1997, and we didn't have any big screens on either side of the stadium either. So all it really was music and my voice, which should be pretty boring for an audience, right? But what happened is in 1999, so 2 years later, we held the Pan Am Games in Winnipeg. And as part of that, some money was set aside to put up a big Jumbotron type screen down at one end of the stadium. So we finally had video, right? So now we actually had a couple of cameras out on the field, and we were starting to build that atmosphere and build that as you said, sort of that stadium feel that you just can't get when you're watching it on TV, right? And then we move into the new stadium in 2013, and man, like we've got everything that you could think of to create an atmosphere or to create a feel that is 10 times better than watching it on TV. Absolutely. And most of the fans now are almost reluctant to sit in their seats because we got a concourse area that goes all the way around. You can watch the game from the concourse, and it's a social event, right? It's it's an experience. If you have not been to a game, you're totally missing out on what it really means to be a fan of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Well, this is so great. I could talk to you all day about this. But you've been so grateful, with your time and coming on. What are you looking for this weekend in terms of the matchup and kind of any other thoughts on the season before we let you go?
So for this season, and we'll start with that. I expect that the Bombers will go all the way to the Grey Cup. But I'm not holding my breath on that one because stranger things have happened. This is what makes the CFL so exciting, right? Is that a team can be really dominant for the regular season, and then they can start to sputter in the playoffs, as I said, because teams now have a lot of tape to watch and prepare for, right? And it just as an example, just to go back for a second. So we ended up playing the Elks 3 times. And Edmonton didn't do so well in the first game. They played a little bit stronger in the second game. And in the third game, there were a lot of Winnipeg fans chewing their fingernails come the fourth quarter because it was tied at the end of 3, right? 16-16. So the Elks have figured out some way to get pressure on Collaros. That's what I saw. I saw a team that was figuring out the pass rush and doing a pretty good job of containing the run until the fourth quarter. So if other teams are seeing that, right, because they get to see all those games too, they may be able to figure out a way to dampen the danger of our offense and to do some damage on our defense by picking some holes. And so from a season standpoint, it's really important for both the offense and defense play the game they play, and don't let the other guys take advantage of mistakes. Because you know what? Football is a game of mistakes, right? It's a chess game, and if you make the wrong move, you're going to pay. Sometimes you only pay a little bit. Sometimes you pay a lot. And I get that there's also, from a defensive standpoint, sometimes you got to give up a pass play so that the read for the quarterback is actually the wrong read. And later they'll step in front of that ball and they'll take it the other way, right? So I get that you got to sometimes force mistakes on the other side, and sometimes you got to give up something in order to get it later. But I would say for the most part, if the Bombers keep playing the way they've been playing, and man, they do their prep work too, right? I don't think there's a team that can stop them this year. As far as this game coming up with the Lions on Saturday, I just think it's, you do your prep work, go out there and play the game quarter by quarter. Don't think about the rest of the season. Don't even think about next week. Just think about taming these Lions, right? So that's the play, I think, as far as we go.
Well, just maybe this weekend, when they're up like 36-5 against the Lions, if the Lions have a good, Riley's got a good run or something, just give it a little, like Michael Riley for 9 yards, right? Just give him a little, don't be too hard on the Lions this weekend. Maybe give them a little boost in some of the announcing. That'll be good for us. A little pat on the back. So. Bob, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate connecting, and I'm sure we're going to be a successful rest of the season, and I think you're in a good spot to see some more success here coming up. So,
well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, I'm excited for this. We have Josh Burton. Now, I want to figure out, so you're the AD of video ops, right, for the Argos. As someone that also makes a living with a camera in my hand, I would like to know what exactly you do with the organization.
So I would say video is the most misunderstood position. And for most football teams, people think you work with the social media team or with the communications team. Usually when someone says video, they mean they're filming the coaching film for the game. So that would be practice and game film. You also do a lot of film acquisition, be it college film, other professional leagues. And then a lot of your job also involves data and general assistant work with the coaches. So that is what most of my daily duties end up being. So when you see the cool hype videos on Twitter, that's not us. We're the ones filming the All 24 film, or All 22 if it would be American 4-down football. But up here, it's All 24.
Well, that's exciting. I mean, so how it seems like a desirable job, right? Someone that wants to be involved in football, in the CFL, the Argos, good organization. I mean, how did all this? I know you're popular online, so I'm just curious to get a little bit of your story, and then I want to hear about your thoughts of the season.
I don't know if I'd say I'm popular online, but if you want to say that, sure, thank you. I mean, yeah, it is. I think video, honestly, if anyone was looking to get into football and they weren't 100% sure where their path would go or what their skills are best suited to, that is where you want to begin. I think it allows you to get your hands on the most things. You're very involved. You're right there with the coaches and players. And it's simple to start, but it can just grow exponentially. You can add more and more things. You can always be doing more. You can always be getting better at it. And yeah, I like it because I also like filming. I love being behind the camera. It's fun. The actual filming is simple, but like I would just always be happy to watch football. So you kind of get to do what you already want to do. I think you asked how I got involved with this. I mean, I was working with the Calgary Stampeders from 2017 to 2019. And in the off season there, after that season ended, I ended up getting in talks with the Toronto Argonauts and ended up joining the squad here, which was great because they were my favorite team as a kid. So it was very fun to get to kind of join a group that you used to cheer for as well. Although it's different once you're part of it. Obviously, you're not a fan anymore. It's your job. So it's a little more serious, obviously.
Yeah, I always say it's like the security that works at the concert, right? They have to have their back to the performer, right? Watching the crowd where, you're working. It's not as much. We're trying to figure out Grey Cup stuff and they're like, do you want to come as a fan or the media? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I might just want to watch the game. So, as someone that was with Calgary, what do you make of this resurgence right now? Bo Levi seems to be on the mend. They put a thrashing to America's CFL team, the BC Lions last week. So what do you make of Calgary on the warpath right now?
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, having worked there for a couple of years, I know that team has great coaches. They've got a great system, and boy, do they work hard. So it really doesn't surprise me at all to see it all coming together when the weather gets cold, which is what you always expect out of Calgary. And boy, I wouldn't want to be someone who has to face them at any point. They're a great team, really. Yeah.
They're facing the Roughriders again right at home. Roughriders seem to be on a decline right now. What do you make of that? We've talked for weeks about the Cody Fajardo of it all, right? He's the man in black, right? We're throwing some teammates under the bus. What do you make of what's going on in Saskatchewan right now?
I think it's just the ebbs and flows that you get, in any season that you find. You're going to run into teams who have a great game plan for you. But I think they knew that they were having some issues and they addressed that. I know that Duke Williams is a massive acquisition for them, and that's going to be really exciting to see how he works in that offense. I know Cody was talking about needing to make plays deep downfield on 50-50 balls. That's exactly his type of MO. So I'm really excited to watch that game. I think from both ways, I want to see if Calgary can keep their run going, and I want to see what the Riders look like with it. And those are both very talented teams with great rosters from top to bottom. So like that is great football to me right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems last weekend was a little scary, some of the games. I mean, the Lions game was exciting. This weekend is a little more, I feel like we got a little more meat on the bone, right? Argos here, we're traveling. We obviously both stand McLeod Bethel-Thompson, right? The king of the CFL. What do we make? He came out strong, struggled a little bit. Now he's back, seems at the helm, ready to go. What are we making of his success now that we're seeing?
I mean, I think it's all part of the process and what we've been working through all year. If you watch the first game, actually, after the Calgary victory, McLeod talked about that, how this was just the first step on a journey that we would all be taking together this season. And I think for a guy like him, he's been through so many experiences in his career, different places, different leagues. I mean, he's got a great head on his shoulders, and you just know that he's level. He's always going to come through. He's calm, and he's a great leader. So I'm not surprised by how he's been playing at all. I think we all knew it was there. And I mean, yeah, he's got such a beautiful deep ball. It's hard not to want to watch that. So,
well, it's good. Yeah. I mean, we came out, we had our big standing episode, and then he, struggled a little bit. So it's good to see, Argos obviously first in the East right now, looking, it seems like the momentum, it's a good time for them to be hitting their stride, right? I mean, how are you feeling about them right now kind of ending? We don't have that many games left this year.
No, I mean, we don't. And this is exactly when teams need to start proving who you are. I think for any team, particularly in football, for teams who want to win a championship, they need to find out what their identity is late in the season and stick to that. I mean, football is such a different sport than many others in that it's so structured, and you get to basically, there's no other real sport where everything is scripted. You know what I mean by that, right? You're calling a designed play each time. And so it's not such a free flowing game. So you need to know when the going gets tough, what are we good at? What can we run and know we'll execute and get those yardage, get the plays, the points we need. So, I mean, yeah, it's exactly the time that teams need to be, not just us, but all the teams in the league are looking to find their stride. They need to, by now you would have hoped you figured out kind of who you are and what you do well. And it's now all about refining, putting those final few wrinkles in for the opponents you expect to see, and getting ready for the playoff push, right? Setting yourself up for the seeding of where you need to be. So
are you, and I know it's hard to divorce kind of the fan from it. I mean, I feel pretty confident in Toronto right now in that division. I mean, realistically, how are you guys, evaluating the chances that you guys have?
Well, we know that right now we're first in the East, and what matters is taking care of our own business. We need to keep winning games. We're about to face a really good football team here on Friday who's one game behind us. And if they should win this one, that will put them in first. So this is a critical game for us. It's a critical game for them. They're all big games now. So we like where we are, but we can't rest on our laurels. We need to keep going out and winning every week. And we actually have a big matchup coming up against America's favorite football team there next Friday, or I believe next Saturday, in the BC Lions, who is also a football team who might be getting star Lucky Whitehead back for that game. I mean, he's an electric player who you have to always think about. So we got a lot of big games coming up here. There's no easy games left at all for us.
Obviously where you guys are getting ready to face Montreal, right? The Vernon Adams and all of that, right? The Trevor Harris trade, like any talks of any of that sort of stuff. I mean, not to get into anything that you guys should be talking about or not talking about, but I mean, obviously big shakeups on the other side of the field, right? Approaching the game this weekend.
I mean, of course, right? Like it always depends with your game plan and what you'll do depending on the players your opponent will be putting out there. But I think we trust what we've been working forward to. We know that obviously Vernon won't be out there playing, and that's a huge loss for them. And, we hope to see him get back and healthy and back to the way he was. He's such an electric player. He's so great for this league. I mean, he's great on social media. The fans love him. And I mean, what he does on the field as well is just, it's hard not to have your jaw drop sometimes. So yeah, it changes obviously a little bit about what you're expecting and what you think they'll do. But, the rest of the guys are still the same. The rest of the team out there is still the same. So does it change a little bit what they might be doing? Sure. But we know that they're going to come at us with their A game regardless. And Matthew Schultz is a pretty great quarterback, and he just seems to get better and better every time he steps on the field. So you can't take anyone lightly. I mean, that's a way to lose a game if you think that you've got to, they've lost someone. So no, that's not how you can ever look at it.
This might have been. I've been busy fighting with Fan Control Football today online. Is Matthew Schultz? Is he going to be the starting quarterback this weekend for Montreal?
I mean, I would expect it to probably be him. I don't know. I mean, from what I heard, I don't. And this is honestly what I heard through public stuff, is that I don't believe it's quite the turnaround fast enough to get Trevor out there in time, is from what I would guess. And I would assume they'd go with Schultz because he's looked great out there. So why wouldn't you? It seems like they've got some mojo going with them. And again, in all the times I've seen him out there, he's always been doing good things and putting his team in positions to win games. So, yeah, I would expect it to be him probably.
Yeah, I mean, that's my belief too. I just wanted to make sure, I would hate to miss something on that. And I'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
Talking about Coach Jones coming in, obviously seeing the defense, right? Immediate impacts. It was like 3 defensive touchdowns, that first real game. I mean, what impact does that have for what was already a good team? But I would say, as much as we love McLeod, defense has really carried a couple of these games here recently.
I would agree with that assessment. Yeah, I think our defense has put us in positions to allow our offense and special teams to win the game late. So, yeah, I think that's a good assessment. And having Coach Jones come in, for someone like me who's a very data and analytically minded person, I mean, it's perfect. I mean, he's all about that. He's all about reports. He's all about different ways to break down your opponents and figure out what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, what you're doing yourself. So for me, it's been great. And just the more talented football minds I can work with, the more I learn. I find that I've worked with some pretty great people already in my 5 years in the CFL, and just adding another person like that, it can't help. It can't hurt at all. And you should always be looking to pick up knowledge from everyone you work with, because why would you stop ever? I mean, right? It's silly to think you know even enough, even if you've been in the league for, say, 30 years. There's always someone who could give you more. And so just to work with someone like him it's a dream come true, honestly. Yeah.
What's the vibe with the team, right? Coach Dinwiddie coming in, a lot of success going right now, right? I mean, obviously we see with Edmonton, first year coach, right, having some struggles. I don't want to get into all the other crap right now, but I mean, at least on the field, a lot of struggles. It has to be a lot of excitement going on kind of in the locker room, right? I mean, on the practice field. What is the vibe like for the team?
I think it's fun but focused. I really think this group has something special going on with the way we've all come together. I think, the year off really made for a lot of turnover in the league, a lot of new faces here, myself included, obviously. And I really like the way it doesn't really ever feel like there are some people who are more important or less important than others. Everyone knows their role and everyone is just so close. It really is a great group. And I mean, it comes from, like, as you said, it comes from Coach Dinwiddie down, but everyone else has bought into this. And we're having a good time. We enjoy each other. We enjoy working together. But as I said, focus, though. We know we've got a goal and we've got work to be done. And we're not here to enjoy ourselves. We're here to win football games. And you know what? Winning football games is pretty enjoyable. So that's where the fun comes out of it, right?
What do you make of this Hamilton REDBLACKS game, right? Obviously Argos, squeaked by the Ticats last time. What are we? I mean, is Hamilton going to get back their groove here? I mean, we have Ottawa; they've struggled as well. What are you making of that matchup?
Well, I don't know if I'd say Hamilton lost their groove. I mean, they did drop 2 games late there to 2 divisional opponents, but they were looking good in both those games as well. I mean, Hamilton is an incredible roster that is really well coached. You know that every time you face them, they're going to have something special designed just for you. So I think Hamilton will come in with everything ready because they know that they have to win. Likewise, I think Ottawa, they're not having the season I think they would hope they would have had it, obviously. But that doesn't mean they're just going to sit back and let other teams beat them like that. No one does that. Everyone's playing for their jobs. Everyone's playing for their own pride. And Ottawa's got some great playmakers on them too. It's pretty tough for them to lose a guy like Dedmon. He is such an incredible returner, so that's going to be hard for them. But Hamilton can't take any game lightly. No one can take games lightly, right? It's how it is late in the season. If you start to think, well, on paper or in the media, we are supposed to be better than this team, that's when you're going to lose. Because no one's going to just say, oh, here, please have the W. You're better than we are, but that's just not how it works, right? So I know Ottawa's going to be out there playing for everything too. I mean, they're not officially eliminated at all, so why wouldn't they? They've still got a chance.
Yeah, I mean, look, Edmonton really put the screws to Winnipeg last week,
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
one that should have been. Dane Evans, right, obviously coming off the injured reserve, that has to obviously help. I mean, that was such a blow for them, right? It just felt like they were kind of hitting their stride midseason, and then we have Dane Evans go down. Thoughts on him returning to the roster? I mean, obviously he can't hurt, it's obviously going to help, but I mean, thoughts of him? He just seems like a remarkable human, a good leader, right? Someone that's good on that team. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his injury occurred against us in the Labor Day rematch, and you could see it from their team, how important he is to them. It was hard to watch those guys go through that because you knew how important he was to them, and it was hard to watch a guy like Dane, who obviously knew that he just suffered a serious injury or a somewhat serious injury, let's say. So that's huge for them to get him back. I know that Mazzoli's also a great guy for them. And it really is exemplary of what the CFL is. You got to have 2 quarterbacks because this is a pass-first league where you play a lot of football and a lot of passing downs. So guys are going to get hit, guys might get hurt, and you need to have someone you can turn to keep the season going if or when that does occur. I think if you look at almost every team in the CFL this year has used, not all of them, but the majority of them have used 2 quarterbacks at this point or more. So that's a critical part of roster management is to make sure you've got enough guys, and having a guy like Dane come back, you got to think that will energize them and get them going. And I know that he and Mazzoli kind of had the same thing going last year in 2019. So I got to think they're just happy for each other's success, right? Whenever the other one's on the field, all they're doing is cheering for them. So yeah, I think it'll be huge for them. Yep.
I see you post a lot about like wardrobe choices and like winning streaks, right? And like we're winning at. So I want to know what is the philosophy behind that, and what are we going to be doing to travel here to Montreal coming up?
Well, I mean, originally it was just started more as a joke. I mean, it started in Calgary. Generally, whatever game day shirts the coaches wear would be the sort of the opposite of what the players were. If they were wearing red, we wear the black or white ones, just for some contrast and kind of to make it clear on the sidelines, who's in what role. And it gives a nice cohesive look. So I just started doing that here out of a habit. So for our first couple road games, I wore we have a blue polo and a white polo. I wore the blue one. It was nice. And then for our first home game, I wore the white one. And then, as you know, we're 4-0 at home this year and haven't lost. So maybe there's a little bit of magic in it. So I decided to end up wearing that to our last game in Hamilton, a place where, as you know, the Toronto Argonauts have only won previously one time since Tim Hortons Field opened. And then we happened to have an incredible victory like that. Anytime you can have a walk-off field goal to win, it's pretty special. So we're 5-0 when I wear the white polo, and I think it'll definitely have to make an appearance in Montreal. Can't stop that now.
Yeah, you don't have you're packing for the trip. You don't have to pack much. You just have to pack the lucky shirt. So
yeah, exactly. Well, and pants would probably be important too.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on the season. Obviously excited to be back. I've seen. Even today, talk online, are the games exciting enough? Or, NHL is back now, the NFL. I mean, what are you just overall thoughts on the season? And I mean, I think we're just happy that everything exists, right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, but, especially for a winning franchise right now, it has to feel good. But just thoughts, general CFL, 2021 thoughts?
Well, yeah, I first and foremost just so happy the league is back and we're playing football again. I've been a lifetime CFL fan. It means so much to me and so much to so many people in this country. As far as people saying the games aren't exciting enough, I mean, I guess I just have to disagree with that. I have seen so many late game victories, so many late game big plays being made. But I think the difference this year is it seems like this is just a year where the defenses are probably having a bit more control. I think most people are used to watching the CFL when it's a wide open, all offense, all the time game. And there's a lot of really talented defensive and defensive coordinators in the league right now. And I think that currently, and often sports go like that cyclically, where there'll be a lot of minds or strategies that are working on one side of the ball, and then the other side adjusts. So right now, we definitely have a lot of strength in the defenses in the CFL. Not that the offenses don't look good either, but yeah, I mean, for people who are hoping that every game would have 70 to 80 combined points, that hasn't been what we've gotten this year. But I just checked the stats recently. I think it's about 58 or 59% of games are currently this season being decided in the final 3 minutes. And the average margin of victory is around 7 points. So 1-score games. To me, in a football game, if it ends in one of the two, or ideally both, a 1-score game where the final, the lead is changing or tied in the final 3 minutes, what more could you ask for? That's what football is. And that's why I think, at least for me, that's what keeps it, for me, the sport that I can't stop watching, is that there's no other game that seems to have late game magic like that. It almost seems like scripted almost at times. You go, who would believe this is occurring? But it just happens over and over in this sport. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. You know that too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like the walk-off field goal. It's just, CFL is at a disadvantage, right, with the number of games each week. You're going to have stinkers. You have stinkers in every league, right? The Kraken got blown out last night in NHL. Yeah. It just happens. It's just there's a lot more spotlight when there's only 3 games or 4 games a weekend. You're going to have dogs on that. This has been great. I'm so glad. We're working our way into the Argos organization. Paul, my co-host, is an Argonauts fan, so we will be excited. Hopefully to cheer you guys on. In the Grey Cup, I think in the East. So thank you so much again for taking the time to come on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Reid. I'm glad to join you and pull together.
Safe travels, right? You guys. Okay.
Yes, that's right. We're off tomorrow to Montreal, so thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we have Roy S. Johnson here of AL.com. I just listened to a wonderful 20-minute chat you guys did about this, and I'm excited because I feel like you have a really good understanding of kind of all the businessy stuff that's going on with this and the big deep dive into this USFL in Birmingham. Why don't we recap first off, what is the latest in terms of this? We've called it an agreement of an agreement to start moving all of these things going into the Birmingham.
Sure. Well, earlier this week, Fox, as owners of something called the National Spring Football League, and the Birmingham Jefferson County Civic Center, which is the entity that would host the games, Protective Stadium, came to a memorandum of understanding that lays out a lot of details about what an ultimate agreement would be, but it's a non-binding agreement. And it lays the groundwork for now negotiating and working towards a binding agreement. Fox has said that it wants to try to reach an agreement sooner rather than later, ideally by the end of this week, which might be a bit of a challenge. But with their schedule and the needs that they have for creating this bubble, they certainly have the right to say, look, we need to know sooner rather than later, so they can go to plan B if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, listening to your chat, it seems like in terms of, and we were talking about this before we recorded, the concerns that spring football fans have versus the concerns that the municipality of Birmingham, Alabama has are quite different in terms of, we care about, okay, when this is kicking off, what's the schedule? What are the broadcast partners? Where you guys have actual feasible questions, who is paying for this? How are we housing all these players? How are we feeding all these players? Are you sensing any real blowback now that some of these numbers and plans have come out?
Blowback is a pretty big word. I think everyone is doing their due diligence. There are a lot of moving parts here. And if you allow me to kind of set the landscape. So the proposal is that the USFL would play a 12-week season, including playoffs, all here in Birmingham. And what that means is 8 teams would be playing. Their games would be, I think it's 40 games and then 3 playoff games. They would be broadcast on either Fox or NBC or some of their affiliated cable networks. And this agreement actually contains the details of which networks each game would be broadcast on. Fox Sports 1, USA, what else? Peacock is also mentioned here. So the games would be spread out over all of these networks. And so the who pays for that? Fox wants the stadium use for free, okay? Because they're bringing almost 800 people here and are going to fill up over 40,000 room nights, which the local Convention and Visitors Bureau has projected an economic income of $15 million on the area just based on them being here. So ultimately then, who pays the cost? What is the cost for the USFL to do this in terms of just stadium operations? You got to open the doors. You got to sell tickets. You got to clean it up. There's wear and tear on the fields. So what does that cost? And then who pays for it? The entities that will probably have to chip in include the city of Birmingham, Jefferson County, which of course where Birmingham exists, and possibly the Convention and Visitors Bureau, because they're going to benefit obviously from them being here, and maybe the private sector, maybe even Protective, which is a large company here that has the naming rights for the stadium. Maybe they'll kick in a little bit too. So it's almost like you've got this bunch of people around the table. What is the number that they need to reach? Is it 4 million? Is it 5 million? Is it 3 million? And whatever it is, who's going to chip in what? There's no question there's a major benefit here in terms of just tax revenue. Every meal these people buy, every hotel room, everything they do for the 12 weeks generates new taxes that were really like manna from heaven. It's like unexpected taxes. There are costs that go with it, and there's taxpayer dollars. So everybody's doing their due diligence, and they're all sitting around a poker table trying to figure in who's in for what and how do they get to that number.
I will tell you, you walking around with the proposed, networks and times and games and stuff. A lot of people would find you on the street and tackle you for that. A lot of our listeners. So I would be, but because that was interesting to us when that came out, right? Because the assumption had been, we followed this from the spring league last year, the bubble season in Fox. It was in Indianapolis and then Houston, right? They kind of had the 2 bubble seasons. But all the games are on Fox. It's interesting that all this has come out, games on NBC, like you said, Peacock. What percentage of that, is that a good mix on other networks from looking through all that?
Without getting into exact numbers, I believe about 30 of the 40 games, maybe fewer, will either be on Fox or NBC. So most of the games will be broadcast on the major networks, but I see USA down for, and I'll just count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. Peacock, I see 3, 4. FS1, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 8. So there's a balance there. So like I said, maybe 25 to 30 on Fox or NBC. NBC, I see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then Fox several as well. So, again, without getting into the exact numbers, it looks like a pretty good balance. At least half would be on Fox or NBC, with the others spread out over those other networks I mentioned: USA, Fox Sports 1, and Peacock.
And this is proposed. I mean, this is a proposed. This isn't like
Absolutely.
I don't want people to tell you. I mean, this is. And then in terms of a proposed timeline, what are we looking at?
Well, again, if they want to play the first games, the first game in this understanding is scheduled for Friday, April 15th. So if you back that out, you're going to have to be here, by early next year. And so this is a big entity. So I imagine that they and if it's not going to happen in Birmingham, they're going to want to know, again, sooner rather than later. I think this might stretch to the end of the month, but that might be about as far as it can go before the National Spring Football League, i.e. Fox, will have to go to its plan B. And that would be a pretty significant, in my opinion, blow for Birmingham and for Jefferson County, because I believe that this would generate a lot of not just income for the city, but just be a great thing for this new stadium to showcase that the city invested in this. A lot of people, the state, the city, the county invested in this stadium, and already it is attracting something that the city would not have been able to attract without Protective Stadium. So just to give your listeners some background, Protective Stadium literally just opened less than a month ago. There have only been 2 games played there. It was controversial. Something that the city has been trying to do for 30 years and finally was able to do. But the fact that it was being done, I heard that the head of Fox was literally watching the construction cam and was just fascinated by this new shiny toy that a city like Birmingham was creating. So it clearly has been a magnet already for interest, not just from the USFL, but for concerts, and other types of sports events that otherwise might not have thought about coming to Birmingham.
What is your understanding of what is the National Spring Football League entity? Because and I know that we talked off cam, we don't need to get into all the, the trademark legalese, but I guess what is your understanding of what that is?
So my understanding is that the National Spring Football League is an entity that is mostly owned by Fox and has other owners. I think your listeners know. I think you talked about the person that you believe that was somebody who helped drive this deal to get Fox involved. My understanding is that they've invested $150 million into this entity to gather all of the trademarks and be able to launch this with the 8 teams, including the Birmingham Stallions, which has got a lot of people excited around here because the Stallions were part of the original USFL that played in those 3 seasons. So my understanding is that it's an entity primarily owned by Fox, and it allows Fox to do this a little bit differently. I've tried to get people to look at this different from other leagues. Other leagues, the teams are all owned by people. They're dependent on ticket sales. They're dependent on local sponsorship in order to drive profitability, to be able to pay for all their costs. This is very different. This is a programming play for Fox. So it's almost like a game show. I say, look at this like a game show. They're creating a game show. They're going to try to fill the house with cheap tickets, giveaway tickets, just so it looks good. But in terms of sponsorship and commercial time, they're making their money on that end. And it's going to be national sponsors, really not local sponsors. I don't get the sense that they're going to go too much into the local market of Birmingham and compete with entities like the Birmingham Legion, which is a soccer team here, the Birmingham Barons, the AA baseball team for sponsorship. No, they're just going to drop in here, show these games on their networks, make their money on advertising, and get eyeballs that are hungry for football. As you know, there is an unquenchable thirst for football around the nation, if not around the world. And so that's the idea, that they're not dependent on ticket sales or local revenue, local sponsorship. This is a pure programming play that will allow them to attract eyeballs in the spring and generate revenue off of advertising in those eyeballs.
Quick question, and I have a bigger follow-up. What's the seating capacity of the stadium there?
40,000+. I'll look it up, or you can go to the next question. But I'll look it up while we're talking.
Yeah, I mean, that's not right. I mean, not exactly, just rough. When you're talking, so because there's always been, there's the Brian Woods question, right? Negotiating with Fox, you say primarily owned by Fox. Is it entirely owned by Fox? Do we know that relationship?
I don't know that relationship, and would only be guessing in order to say that. I imagine that if Brian Woods has been part of it, that he might still own a portion of it. But again, that would be totally pure speculation. But there's no question that this is a Fox Sports play. Has
that name been brought up to you before I started talking about it?
Only in my own research did I see the name. So it wasn't brought up to me by any of the local entities that are part of the negotiation. So it wasn't the first time I heard it when I heard it on your show, but I'm not familiar with him at all.
Okay. There's been a question on the amount of money being spent, right? I had seen 200 million, I believe more, like you've said, it's the 50 a year, right? For a 3-year, questions about, okay, well, if the XFL had, when Vince McMahon did the XFL last year, if he spent 200 million, what is 50 million? And, we've been trying to temper our listeners' expectations of, this could be connected to the Spring League, right? Which was Brian Woods' previous venture or not. I still feel like it's going to very much look and feel like that, an 18 bubble season, different names perhaps, right? Before we had names like the Jousters, the Blues, right? I mean, now you might call them the Stallions or the Maulers, but, 50 million does seem sufficient in terms of launching that sort of bubble season, not in 8 cities, right? In one city. Are you, in terms of the money being invested, what are your thoughts on that proposed budget and then them eventually trying to raise more money? I would imagine when they're moving to the cities and bringing in investors for those cities.
Being somebody, and your viewers may not know, I covered sports for 40 years with Sports Illustrated and the New York Times. So I've been deeply involved in the industry for a while. And as they all know, these spring leagues have been tough because they've been based on that basic formula where you got to drive fannies in the seats, as it were. You got to drive local sponsorship. And they just haven't generated enough to keep even these richest guys from saying, you know what, I've had enough. This is very different. Again, it's an entity, Fox Sports, making an investment. And the bubble is only the first year. My understanding is that the second and third years, they will go back to a more traditional model and have teams in 8 cities, including Birmingham. And they'll have local ownership, but it won't be, the franchises everything will still be owned by Fox. So I think they're going to learn a lot this year, that the financial model this year will be a lot different. than it will be in year 2 and year 3, because now you're talking about having to pay likely to be in stadiums. You're talking about perhaps local ownership trying to get local sponsorship. So it's almost like they've got to have two models. They got to have a model for the bubble season and then a model for years 2 and 3. Right now, I think they're not thinking about 2 and 3. They're just trying to get to 1 and then through 1. And again, this idea was created at a time during the pandemic and modeled after the NBA bubble. They don't have to do it this way, but the idea is intriguing to them because it may actually save them money in that first year. And Birmingham's not a bad place to be in the spring. The cost of living here is much cheaper, so they get a better idea of controlling costs by just bringing everyone to one place, one entity. Again, it's a different model than 2 or 3, but it'll give them a pretty good idea of what their run rate is going to be to operate going forward, and gives them another year to really figure out the 8 teams and 8 cities model.
Yeah, certainly, that's certainly something people don't want to hear, with the XFL postponing to 2023. I think a lot of people looked at this launching in 2022, filling that gap, right? Of, okay, well, we're then, if the XFL is going to push back, like we're going to have this. And I do, like you said, I think that this is going to be a test season, right? To see how far. I don't know. When we had the spring league, it was, like I said, we had, the Jousters or the Alphas, whatever these team names, very little marketing, very little expectations. And they would get, 400,000 viewers a game, and people would go, well, that's great because, who cares about, Team Purple versus Team Blue? When you bring in these legacy names, the lineage names, all the baggage with the USFL, I worry that they're setting up unrealistic. And then I see numbers quoted that they're expecting like 1.4 million viewers, right? I think those are numbers that Fox brought. I mean, how realistic, knowing that the spring league last year in Indianapolis drew 400,000 viewers on a good day on Saturday on Prime Fox, to get 1.4, I worry about those numbers being a little inflated.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question that, they may be being a little aggressive in those projections, and we'll just have to wait and see. If you're smart about creating your teams, I think one of the things that has been learned in the last few years is, at least locally, if you populate your teams, here you are in Alabama. How many great former college players are there here that aren't playing in one of these other leagues that you kind of populate here? And it may not mean much to television viewers, but if you've got players from Alabama A&M, Alabama State, you obviously have Auburn, you've got Troy, you've got University of Alabama, you've got UAB, a lot of players who aren't in the NFL. If you start to populate your team with alums from those schools, you might draw a pretty good sizable audience here locally too. Now that revenue won't go to Fox. That ticket revenue will go to the BJCC. But I just think it's just, it's another way to generate interest in your team. And again, if there's more people in the stands, I think that'll be reflective of more eyeballs in front of their televisions as well.
Do you have any thoughts on previous USFL? I mean, knowing the history of that, and I mean, I don't know if you have any former knowledge of that at all.
No, I didn't really cover that. I wasn't covering football at the time. I was more covering the NBA. Look, I applaud any of these efforts to try to capitalize on the unquenchable thirst of football fans in the spring. I mean, clearly nothing has been sustainable to this point, and so I'm always intrigued when somebody else thinks they have a better way to make this sauce. So hey, is not my money. So have at it. I think if there's any model that can work, it is this one where the entities are owned by a television station, because that's also been another challenge, is getting a television contract. Most sports make most of their money with a television deal. So if the league is owned separately and dependent on getting a television deal, that's always been the biggest hurdle. That's not the hurdle here. They've got the television deal. They're going to get the exposure. So I think this model has the best chance of succeeding. What success looks like, we don't know yet. Fox has made its projections about eyeballs, but the fact that it has a television deal in place that guarantees it exposure, guarantees the city of Birmingham exposure, because this memorandum of understanding says there will be at least one, if not two, 30-second spots for each game. I think that's the best model. So I would try to assure your fans, like, if anything is going to succeed, it might be this, because it does have that television audience that most of the spring leagues have been trying to get and buying to get and praying to get, and we're just never able to obtain.
Yeah, I think it's like negotiating with house money, when you're just like, when we own it, we can prioritize it in our lineup. We can make sure. That's always been the concern with the XFL of, getting the right money in place. The question with this is if this bubble season works, you're still making that jump then, like you've said before, and seeing all these other spring leagues fail or not work out. Like, maybe this does work for a year, but then this is still one step before the big step, if that makes sense.
It is. It's a different step. And again, who knows what their model will be. I understand that the league the National Spring Football League, i.e. Fox, will still own the teams and will still put the teams, use it as a programming model, as opposed to, okay, here you own we'll just pay you X dollars and you have to make the money. So I don't think that ownership will move totally to the local level. So I think it will still be an entity that is wholly owned by National Spring Football League and Fox, and we'll figure out what their local ownership model is. It may just be a partnership where someone maybe invests for the right to bring that team there. So I'm sure they've thought through that. It's just not part of this memorandum of understanding.
What makes you believe that it's going to be more Fox continuing to have the ownership versus franchising out the teams?
Well, ultimately, that's the model. I mean, the model is that they own the teams, and that gives them the incentive really to put them on the air. Having to go and or sell them in franchising is a little different. It's not worth digging into the weeds in that. There may be some value to some model of local ownership, and I'll be interested to see what they begin to put out, as opportunities for local ownership. But I think there will be a team, for instance, in Birmingham, whether there's local ownership or not. There'll be players here. There'll be coaches here. There'll be uniforms. There'll be a stadium. They'll play the games, whether there's local ownership or not, because ownership ultimately resides with the National Spring Football League, i.e. Fox Sports.
Cool. Well, you've been so gracious with your time. I'm looking here as the time has gone by. Any other nuggets or tidbits, anything before we let you go? It's been very helpful, and I hope, we'll get you back on here again as more unfolds.
Sure, absolutely. This is a moving target. I try to touch base with all the entities involved and get as much information as I can every day. I'm about to head to a meeting right now within the next hour and a half of the board of directors of the BJCC, the Birmingham Jefferson Civic Center. That is the entity that would host the USFL. So that should be an important meeting just to see where we are. It's a public meeting, so I'm looking forward to hearing where they say negotiations are. As I've mentioned, Fox wants to have the deal done by the end of the week. I don't know if I put my money on that, but you got the city of Birmingham, you got Jefferson County, and you got private monies. They've all got to get around the table and figure out how much they have to raise and who's going to put in what. And that's going to take a little time. But we'll just stay in touch. And as soon as I think we have an agreement, I'll let you know.
Perfect. I appreciate that. I like having boots on the ground. I like having, men in the field. So thank you very much for your time today.
Absolutely. Good luck, and we'll talk again soon.
Welcome back. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us here on the Markcast. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, I'm looking at the camera a lot more today because I got the Google Doc up here on this monitor, so I can actually read. It's cool. It's a cool little setup I got going on here. I want to thank Pat Steinberg, Robert McGregor, Josh Burton, and Roy Johnson, all for their input. Joining Reid here on the Markcast.
Yeah, so we got our USFL stuff right now. So we're going to kind of just a couple thoughts on this. I mean, obviously, Roy and I did a lot. Paul, so what we know now, April 15th is the proposed kickoff date, right? So that would put training camps, kind of that end of March, right? March 20th. The other thing about it was the mentions of games potentially on Peacock and on FS1 and on Fox and USA with that, which is owned by NBC. So thoughts on kind of mucking up those waters of broadcast deals?
I mean, I guess like USA and NBC and Fox have kind of been in bed a little bit, like allowing characters on, because they have separate WWE deals, like they've signed those deals with Vince. So they're allowing characters to kind of cross over every once in a while. So there's some kind of working relationship here. I'm not sure how long this will last, but it's just very interesting that two networks got in on this, because I don't know. And what does that mean for FCF? They're on Peacock too.
Well, I know they're on like that Peacock, and we'll talk FCF here coming up. I mean, they're on like that, Peacock or NBC LX or whatever, like it's the off brand. Right. The weird thing with this too, and so listener of the show, Seth, we've been tracking a lot of this stuff. So right now, there is the National Spring Football League, and they own the trademarks to the USFL and all of that. That is Fox. Roy talks about this. We've confirmed all that. The mailing addresses, everything for the National Spring Football League is an LLC owned by Fox Broadcast. The USFL is also trademarked currently by the Spring League, owned by Brian Woods, and then also by, I think it's ATL. It's like a separate third brand or a third LLC that is also owned by Brian Woods. So something is odd here, because Roy believes that Fox is spearheading this deal. I've reached out to Brian Woods. Brian didn't get back to me. He got back to Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell's not the one recording podcasts every week. Brian Woods, I would probably get back to me on this as well. So something is weird that way. ShopUSFL.com is a thing now. So you can go on there. This was discovered by Jake Henry, friend of the show. You can buy merch. So they have merch. Of course, I ordered a hat because we're going to test it. We tweeted about this. It's run by Printful, which also does our merchandise. Which sometimes has problems, shipping merchandise sometimes when you need it. But the 4 teams that are on the merch store are the Philadelphia Stars, the Pittsburgh Maulers, the Birmingham Stallions, and the New Orleans Breakers. All kind of that demographic, that side of the country, right? A lot of makes sense, right? The Birmingham thing. The merchandise looks terrible. It's like a Printful store, right? I mean, it's like what we did. So the thought process Seth and I had was like, I think Brian Woods is still involved in this, but it's like, are they launching this to show USFL commerce, right? To like have rights to the trademarks?
Maybe.
You know what I mean? Because like if you start, you have to show it like use in commerce, because it's such a hastily thrown up store. I mean, it's if you go on there right now, shopusfl.com. I bought a $20 hat. I paid through PayPal. The PayPal address is shopusfl.com, but the name of it is the Spring League. Like it's very like not a Foxy feeling thing.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. That might be illegal too.
Well, it's weird. Like it's like if you still buy stuff on XFL, it's fulfilled through WWE. Which is still really weird to me. But I mean, to this day, you can buy, if you go right now and buy something on XFL.com, it will ship from WWE headquarters. So
one thing ship from WWE headquarters. If the other thing, if WWE is billing you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's billed XFL. I mean, it's the fulfill. I mean, I think that's fine. It's just weird. So this National Spring Football League, anyway, but that is basically Fox. They own the USFL now. They're negotiating these deals. There's a list of other, trademarks, the Showboats, the Orlando Renegades, the Bulls, all these things. So that we're trying to figure out what 8 teams are going to be in this. But I would have to say, obviously, the Stars, the Maulers, the Stallions, and the Breakers being on the merch site. There's also like this horrendous camo flat bill hat. There's a normal flat bill hat. But it's just really weird. Like that, it just doesn't feel like this is a Fox $150 million deal going into this.
This isn't passing the smell test. It hasn't. It hasn't since we talked about. Since it first got brought up, like we're told he bought the rights. So like we talked to the homeboy that we thought had the rights to this. Like we talked to copyright lawyers or a lawyer, not singular. But it's like none of this makes sense. This is so weird. There's not a good feeling behind any of this.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess takeaway, because I get a lot of like, okay, what is going on with the Spring League? I would say takeaways today. I think April 15th is the kickoff date. This is whatever. I don't care if it's connected to the spring league or not. This is going to be the spring league with different colors on the jerseys. That's what this is. Roy talks about it. It's a 3-year plan. Year 1 to 2, they're going to start incorporating some other cities and owners. This year, it's going to be the spring league, but without the Jousters, it's going to be the Stallions. And without the Blues, it's going to be the Maulers or whatever. But that's all it's going to be this year. I mean, hypothesize all you want for the podcast. It's great for our listeners, but like I've done a lot of work the last couple of weeks. I've talked with these reporters are in the room with the officials while they are having these meetings. This is an 18 bubble season. I do not think there's going to be a draft. I think it's going to be very much like the spring league where they assign quarterbacks, they assign players based on the coaches. I do not believe on October 20th, we are going to hire coaches for a season since that's not going into training camp until March. I wouldn't imagine coaches getting hired until February. I really wouldn't. I don't see any reason to put a soul on payroll in the year 2021 at all.
Nope. Good for tax benefits too. And apparently, according to John Ferguson, a source is claiming the spring league is no longer working with.
Yep. Oh, but the spring league is not working with USFL. So there's some question of like, I think the spring league is still going to exist in some form. We do not know what that is. But this USFL this year, I believe, is going to be a very carbon copy of what the spring league was, like I said, with the fresh paint. And then whatever that ends up being, the TSL could just be a training camp or whatever. But I think that those two things are very separate.
So many questions to be answered. More questions are going to be answered soon. Who's going to run the XFL? Of course, we had our fearless leader step down recently. And now there's 3 potential candidates to run the league's operations per Mike Mitchell. You got former Houston Texans GM, Executive Vice President of Football Ops, Rick Smith, former General Manager, Executive Scott Pioli, and former Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres President Russ Brandon.
Do you have any thoughts on Russ Brandon? I know that there's issues. He has...
I did remember something about Russ Brandon. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was some bad stuff about him that came out.
Yeah, Mike's kind of down on that. And this isn't a deep dive on any of these names today. I just had a couple of quick notes. Russ Brandon seems to be the front runner. Mike wrote in his article that he's had some past with some female harassment issues, things like that, going back kind of like a Dan Snyder-y, kind of feels like maybe a little bit, related tangentially with the Washington football team. My vote always, since I've heard that Mike mentioned Scott Pioli probably 9 months ago, 6 months ago. I can't remember when we were talking about it. That's always been my vote for this. Scott Pioli, he's on Good Morning Football every week. He basically has a standing appointment on there. He won a bunch of, obviously Super Bowls with the Patriots. He was with the Chiefs. He is someone that carries himself very well on camera. He follows a lot of XFL related media accounts on Twitter. I think Scott Pioli would be my vote as someone that has the credibility with that. Rick Smith with the Texans also as well, but that Russ Brandon seemed to really upset Mike that is a potential someone that could be signed on.
He left Buffalo in rather unfortunate circumstances. So I don't know. I like Scott Pioli too. I'm on the board with you there. You finally agree on something.
There you go. And then rounding out here, and then we'll get out of here.
Former fan control football wide receiver Travis Toynbee has signed with the Giants. Giants are still going to suck no matter who they sign because they need to upgrade that offensive line.
And they need a new quarterback.
Well, he could be good. It just got to get a better offensive.
Any dime.
So on the Jets too. And then this is ridiculous. It's the dumbest crap ever.
Yeah, so we talked about this a week or two ago on the podcast that Fan Control Football has this IRL NFTs going on. So they posted the big video today. This has been around before, but I retweeted and I said, how can we get more money? How can we profit more from our fans? I think the quote that I used. And it's so weird to me, the people that so vehemently defend this league, right? I understand some people have spent money and they own these teams, they own, right, 0.001%, whatever. But all I'm trying to do is point out, hey, maybe I would think about this before you put some money on this. Or hey, that is our role as the independent media that's clearly not liked by Fan Control Football. And that's fine. I have criticisms about Spring League and Brian Woods. I have criticisms about the XFL. It's not an anti-FCF thing. But when you're basically what you can do now is the process they did last year where you could go on, pick the team names and the colors and all that. Now that's like paywall reserved for at least a couple of the teams. Like you have to pay to do, that's what this, like it's an NFT, which is, like Dorothy right now is like, what's an NFT? It's like a digital thing that doesn't exist, right? It's a non-physical thing, but it's an in real life non-physical thing. So that doesn't make sense at all. Paul's like having a seizure, but yeah.
NFTs are digital assets. That's what they are. It's basically like crypto, digital assets, all that stuff coming together. Like these things go through the blockchain when you acquire NFTs. In real life, NFTs, it's an oxymoron. It's a contradiction. It doesn't make any flipping sense whatsoever. It's so stupid. This is dumb.
I just don't like that. Basically, we did this last year, and now, we can charge for this. So now we're going to charge you. We're going to hide things behind a paywall. That's what I don't like about it, because you're going to get kids that like, I want to be a part of that. Until Patrick and the team can answer me how you get any money paid back for your ownership of these, there is no profit sharing. There is no buyout abilities, anything like that. Until I know how, like, I would get my money back for my $250 or $1,000, I think, investment, I just wouldn't be spending money on this. The football can be fine. I'll watch the football, I'll do all that. I just wouldn't be like figuring out more ways to spend money on this.
This is a grift. I'm sorry. I'm going to call it for what it is. They didn't raise enough money when and that's the reason why they didn't go in August, because they didn't have enough money. They didn't raise enough money to go in August. And if they did raise enough money, they didn't manage it correctly, because they were supposed to go in August, remember? They're going to have the second season in August. That's a grift. It's a grift. And you guys, anyone that's paying for this crap is being taken to the cleaners.
Well, that's how I do feel, that they tapped out the resources that they raised before, and then now they're trying to figure out. That is what it reads to me. And if it's not, that's fine. They can be more transparent about it. This is my last comment on this. It was really interesting. I was just alerted to a tweet today from Patrick Dees, basically making fun of the XFL again, rent free for not, hey, they don't exist right now. We're a real league with a logo, or they're a logo, we're a real league, and all this stuff. FCF and XFL have the exact same number of players signed under contract right now, which is 0. FCF also has no players under contract. And then I don't want to hear anything from a league that is selling whatever in real life NFTs about anything that's made believe.
It's not a real thing.
But that's what I mean. Like, right? Like, this would not be the week that I would make fun of something for like not being real while I'm also selling something that's not real.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm like.
Right there. That is the quote right there. This is the week that I wouldn't make fun of something that's not real when I'm selling something that's not real. Because this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
An NFT is not real life.
But this one is real life, Paul.
But it's not an NFT.
Yeah, exactly. That's all it is. Anyway, I'm done with that. Do you want Jackson Mahomes? Don't dance on the logo. I just had that here.
And don't dance on Sean Taylor's number.
Yeah, don't dance on. Yeah, don't do that. Jackson Mahomes. I'll put the video here. Dorothy likes when I put the videos on, but try not give him credit. I'm not going to give him any more publicity. Jackson Mahomes, shame on you. I'm not going to do it.
If you're Patrick Mahomes, at some point you got to sit your family and your wife down and be like, "Stop! You're embarrassing me." At some point.
That's all I've got today. But I think we did good today. We made fun of actual football. We broke USFL news. We had all these interviews. I think we did good today.
Once again, I want to thank our all-ever guests that joined us today. Let me scroll back up to the top of the Google Doc.
Pat Steinberg, Robert McGregor, Josh Burton with the Argos. Great guy. Josh is a good one. And then Roy Johnson. There you go.
All right. So thank you for tuning in. Again, subscribe to us on YouTube. Also, rate our podcast, please. Do that. Do all that fun stuff. And the merch store is back up and running. I will be checking it every day to make sure if the orders are going out, because apparently there was an issue. Didn't even know it until I was made aware of it. So moxiecash.com is back up, or you can go to xflshow.com/merch. That's a quicker way to get right to the XFL stuff when you don't have to read through all the other stuff that Reid doesn't. What are you looking at?
On my logo. I was putting my sweatshirt up there.
There you go. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for listening, and tune in next week. See ya.